How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
This is Mossad's old office. Its motto from Proverbs 24:6 says in so many words, wage war through deception and trickery. Kind of like the CIA's...
Surprises. I mean, intelligence surprises.
Pages, walkie-talkies. Do you know how many equipment surprises in Gaza?
Surprises?
Yeah.
Like you mean intelligence surprises?
Pages, walkie-talkies. Do you know how many equipment, treated equipment do we have in these countries? You can't, you don't. I do.
You mean you mean booby-trapped equipment?
Not only booby-trapped.
And spying.
Manipulated equipment. All right?
In which countries are you talking about?
All the countries that you can imagine.
And not Gaza?
Not Gaza.
Nothing in Gaza at all.
Asked me if I thought Jeffrey Epstein was an Israeli Mossad agent. I said, absolutely, positively, yes. And General Yatom, he sat there like this the whole show. He just goes, oh. And then Dershowitz is like, I object to that. And constantly interrupting. It's not my nature to interrupt. Or if I do, I apologize for interrupting. Finally, Pierce told him, will you just shut your mouth and let the man answer the question? So I said, look, the Israelis have always spied on the United States, deeply. I said, on my very first day at the CIA, where all the new hires, we're sitting in the CIA auditorium called the Bubble, and we're getting briefed by like the head of insurance and the head of this and the head of that, and this is how you fill out your time card, and this is how you pick your health insurance. And the head of security came to brief us. And he said, the most important thing that we're going to need to consider is the issue of counterintelligence. There are enemies behind every bush, and they all want to know what we're working on and what we know about them. We have to protect ourselves. So he said, rule number one, there's a steakhouse right down the road. It's the nearest restaurant to the CIA's headquarters. Don't ever go in that restaurant. Why? Because the KGB thinks that we all eat at that restaurant. So anytime that they're night, everybody in that restaurant is a KGB agent waiting for the CIA guy to come in and who forgot to take his badge off, right?
Yeah.
Don't ever go in that restaurant. Secondly, he said, even our friends spy on us. He said, many of you will come into contact with the two Israeli intelligence officers who are based at the Israeli embassy in Washington. There's a representative from Mossad and a representative from Shin Bet. He said, the FBI has been able to identify 187 undeclared Israeli Mossad agents spread all across the United States, spying on our defense contractors.
It starts with a simple question. and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, December 14th, 2025. Thank you for joining me, guys. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on with the podcast today. So please don't criticize me too much in the chat for the microphone, for the audio, for the video. I don't know what's going on. And the reason that I coughed in the beginning was because I was muted and I was not up there yet. I was still coming through audio-wise. So I'm going to jump all past this today because it's not important. Because I have an incredibly jam-packed show full of very important things to get to, and something's going on that's not worth wasting time on. But I'm not able to broadcast through StreamYard, on Vivaldi, on like 3 different browsers, and now the only one I'm able to even get through won't let me use my camera. I don't understand why. And now loading in, I was pulled back with my audio, and yet that's why I laughed, because I'm clear my throat and I heard it coming through the audio. So who knows what's going on, guys? But see, I'm here to deliver information. That's what I'm here for. I don't care about all the rest of it. I'm not trying to look cool. I'm not trying to stand up and look, I try to dress with decorum, but the important part's the information. So I think that tends to be why people like us get so much, I don't know what you would call this, but this is definitely not just some kind of a glitch. This is not some kind of a mistake. It's incredible to me, but I don't want to take so much time on this. I may have to dive through this and talk about it later just because I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away by what I'm seeing back here and what's going on. It's baffling to me. And it's not like I rarely talk about Israel intelligence and Zionism pretty much consistently. But today there's a very important surging of events going on. And I just find it really fascinating. And just so you guys know, on a side note, there's things that we go through, whether StreamYard or our website, that I'm 100%, and our experts, the people that I hire that go through these things, are convinced there's absolutely manipulation, which happens for, most of people in this field, to be quite honest, to one degree or another. But with the lawsuits and the, literally stamped, we went over all of this. It's quite clear that we're being targeted. And it's just frustrating that we have to go through these kind of ridiculous things. Before I was going live, by the way, there was all sorts of issues on my computer. So maybe there's something wrong with my computer itself. Wouldn't surprise me with all that's going on. Anyway, very important show today, quite honestly. There's a lot to get to. And, what we talk about on the show is always important. It's always, pulling things together, lots of different events going on. But I have a lot to talk about today. I might not even get to it all because of how much I've tried to include. I have a, ambitious show. Let's put it that way. Overall, there's a couple of major events that people are focusing on today. Obviously, Bondi Beach and the very suspicious discussion around it. And that's not conspiratorial. Like you look through this, it's very strange. Like a lot of them have been lately. And let's be clear, there are events that take place that are not standout strange and anomalous, but then still get picked apart, which we should, by the way. We always should. It's our job, I think, anybody, to question these things. But there are events that don't stand out that way. This event stands out very strange for many reasons, including the people involved. It's very weird. We'll go through it. Bondi Beach. We're also going to talk about the reality of what Israel intelligence does and what literally everybody knows about Israel. And that's actually why I'm starting with this. I'll touch on this. I would have brought it up after I was done, but we'll start with Ryan Grimm's post in a second. But it's incredible how obvious it is. Like Wilkerson's clip, they lie. Israel's inveterate liars. Everybody everywhere seems to know this, including the ones that lie about it. So it's an interesting thing to see. The point in saying all that is that when there's an event like this with so much going on, and it seems very, what we'll get into seems it's hard to believe. You should ask, even whether, for sure, ask the question, could this be something that they've manipulated? Could this be something they've created? They being anybody, the U.S. government, Israel, whatever sense it pertains to. If we're watching a U.S. situation, it should be asked whether the U.S. government might be involved. If we're watching something like this, we should ask whether the Israeli government might be involved. The world of the mainstream and even the mainstream alternative, by the way, that have created this era where we're not allowed to ask very obvious questions that you can prove have happened before, it shows you something. And so one of the things we're seeing is the obvious nature of Israel influencing every one of these things we're talking about, whether it's the media, whether it is politics. It's not even debatable. And if you want to make this only about Jewish people, that's your decision. The reality is quite obviously more than that, but it does include that. It's obviously about Zionism, and it's very, very, very influential. At least it was. It infiltrates, it manipulates. David Icke and I had a great interview about Sabbateanism and the kind of the historical roots to what this ultimately is. And they infiltrate governments, infiltrate movements. It's what they do. That being said, many things to overlap this conversation with. I'm going to start with a point about Epstein, just in case you haven't seen the development. We're going to talk a bit about, the Israel infiltration part. I decided to put that in the beginning. You've seen some of it, but it's important to hear these things and understand why I think that's important and how you'll see it relates to all of these things, whatever topic it may be, to know what they're capable of, what they're doing, and what they're, trying to build, I guess, is what I would see it as. But there's a lot of ways to look at it. But we're going to talk about the Bondi Beach shooting and the very weird overlaps. Like I've been calling Orrin, was it Orson or Orrin again? Hold on, it's right here. Ostrov, excuse me. It's Arson. That's what it was. I've been calling him the fake human rights lawyer. Because not to suggest that he's actually not a lawyer, but he is a human rights lawyer on record, and he's openly supporting a genocide and cheering about it. We've talked about this, and I've caught him red-handed more than once involved with very, very blatant lies, deceptions, and borderline psychological operations. Nothing like this. Whether that's what you think this is, we should be questioning that. But this is a strange overlap, is it not? As well as the fact that the people that were there, we're going to get into all of this. But we're also going to talk today about the overlap with immigration and the leaked memo from Bondi. No connection to the conversation other than Pam Bondi being involved with the government. Who knows? And the memo targeting anyone who isn't a Trump supporter. And the overlap with that in regard to Noam and what happened in front of Congress and the embarrassing nature of how blatantly dishonest it is. And from there, we'll talk about many different points of Syria, which, by the way, is an interesting timed overlap conversation with what just happened in Bondi Beach. And if you don't see why those connect, other than the obvious, which you might not even see that, we're going to get into it. It's a very weird overlap with ISIS-linked gangs working for Israel, with Israel and the United States and the UK and plenty of other Western governments involved with the creation, funding, armed, and mobilization of ISIS for a very long time. You can quite literally prove this. And now claiming it's an ISIS-inspired attack or an ISIS attack, despite Trump defeating them 100% multiple times. On top of the fact that we can literally show that they're working with ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria as the leadership. And the conversation of what just happened is Trump and the rest are trying to carefully box out the fact that there's a very clear ISIS element, but it's who they're working with. And now over that, we'll talk about something, if we have time, and I'm really going to try to make it to the point of Palantir, the larger discussion of the network's cult and where that's going, but the technological developments, 5G, AI, as well as this conversation that's been around for quite a long time. Climate change and a company called Stardust Solutions, which just so happens to be run out of Israel with all Israelis, but not connected to the Israeli government, yet it's part of the Startup Nation, which is literally written about Israeli intelligence companies. But the point is that company is now experimentally testing with spraying in the skies, or they claim they're about to, or they have been. We know this. And what that means for the future. And they're tied back in with Peter Thiel and the rest of the team. We're watching the Great Reset take place and pretending like it's not happening if we're on a certain, I guess, inside the paradigm. But plenty more than that too. But let's get into it. Important starting point. And I just randomly included this late. Let me read his tweet first, and I'll give you the larger point that I wanted to take from this. Jasper Nathaniel. I mean, and we're not going to get into the ceasefire, the Gaza situation. We just briefly touched on it before, but we're going to be talking about that more. It's not going away in regard to what they're doing to the Gaza people and Palestinians. It horrifies me. Highest profile killing since the ceasefire began is what it says. New York Times, breaking news. Israel said it had a top Hamas commander in Gaza, or killed a top Hamas commander in Gaza. It literally says, in what would be the highest profile killing of a Hamas leader since the ceasefire began. Okay. Despite the fact that they violated the ceasefire I would say almost, but pretty much literally every day. If you really count some, but just if you take the actual actions, it's been every day. But shootings, bombings, almost every day. And people act like testing the ceasefire. Okay. He says, I'm so confused by this ceasefire. Now, this is just a small point of the larger discussion in regard to the fact that everybody, I mean, is there anybody in the room that's going to go, no, that's still a ceasefire? It's okay when they do it. No, it's ridiculous, guys. Everybody knows. Now, somebody might argue, well, Hamas broke it first, but then why would it still be a ceasefire? You see how crazy that is? So if it's still a ceasefire and you're saying then they just broke the ceasefire, right? No. It's just testing it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So the reality is everybody in the room knows what this is. Everybody everywhere knows that's ridiculous. They're pulling the punch for Israel. It's only broken when Hamas does something, even when they're not even doing the thing they claim they did. Everywhere in the conversation, everywhere. And I mean, almost every part of the conversation, whether it's the U.S. or Israel, this is what we're dealing with right now. Unconstitutional actions that they swear is going to save the country, right? Driving us into technocracy and globalism while claiming we're fighting the deep state. Well, these are more abstract, but the point is doing the obvious thing and then having the entire conversation swirl around it as if it's not what it is. Very blatant things. And it just shows you how broken not just the political situation is, but the entire societal structure at the top. I know that's not even the majority. I'm talking about the elitist structure, the ones right now telling you they're going to save you from the other half of the elitist structure, right? The good oligarchs are going to save you from the bad oligarchs. It's just a transition of power to the same problem. And so what I'm saying is that they see that the media, the mainstream alternative media, and huge other aspects, academia, science. I mean, it's crazy how this kind of thing, and I can't help but feel and see and quite literally prove that Zionism and Israel are a central part, if not the leading problem in all of that. But it very well may be that they're a secondary part to something that is the technocracy above. I mean, you can decide for yourself. It's obvious, though, that as we go through all this, that this is the kind of thing we're dealing with. It is infuriating. For instance, the Epstein conversation. Are we really going to pretend like we don't all see exactly what's going on and how crazy and confusing or we'll get into immigration and MS-13. It's really embarrassing. Anybody with a brain knows what just happened in those conversations, and you get all the screaming morons that come in and act like it's not what it looks like. And some people fall for that. Most people kind of go, well, and try to pull away from it. I don't want to be on and conflate. I don't want to have Cat Turd yell at me tomorrow, whatever it is. Aaron Rupar says I'll just play it, but it's Massey discussing the Epstein case and what if they don't release the documents. I mean, I think we all know that this is not really going to come out in earnest because then people will go to prison, and that never happens. I hope it does. But here's what he says.
If DOJ doesn't release the files it has by next Friday, is there anything Congress can do to compel that to happen?
Well, I mean, it's a crime if they don't. It's not like they're...
Well, that hasn't stopped them before.
In contempt of Congress because they didn't respond to a subpoena. This is a new law with, criminal implications if they don't follow it. But I was encouraged, again, by the fact that they went back to these three judges and got the judges to release the grand jury material to the DOJ.
Thank you,
Is that grand jury material enough, do you think,
no.
to comply with the law?
No, the grand jury material is just a small fraction of what the DOJ needs to release. Because the FBI and DOJ probably has evidence that they chose not to take to the grand jury. Because the evidence they're in possession of would implicate other people, not Epstein or Maxwell. So the grand jury material is probably going to just be mostly facts and evidence that was used to convict those two. And what we want to see are the facts and evidence that the FBI and the DOJ have never given to a grand jury.
Yeah. And I kind of don't think that's going to happen. What do you think? There we go. I mean, it's it being a crime doesn't seem to be that much of a deterrent for criminals, because what's what we're talking about. But it's nice to see that there's pressure, right? But when this comes to pass on Friday, and it inevitably is not what we think it will be, hopefully Massey will stand up and say something about that. I believe he will. He has been. I don't see why he would change that now, but so too should we. Here is what's happening in the meantime. Now, I had a great conversation we'll touch on halfway through in regard to 5G and a lot of other things, by the way, with 7Cs. Really great conversation. We talked about this in the beginning because it had just happened, and it was fascinating because he's very critical of Massey, like we should be, of all of them. I mean, I'm a little less critical just because I'm very skeptical, like I have all of them, but he has been very consistent so far. And anybody standing by what they claim they're going to do and have principled stances, even for a short period of time, begins to pique my interest. Like I said, it'll take years of consistent principled action for me to even begin to actually support somebody, maybe not even then. The point is that he's right to point out that there's overlapping Zionist funding. I've made that point before. It's minuscule in regard to the bigger picture, but it does matter. And apparently it's one of his larger funders, but it's a secondary connection. It's not necessarily but it matters. As well as the fact that there's other examples of things that are worth pointing out that we should be skeptical about. But like I said, it should be constantly holding his feet to the fire, especially if we want to see if he is who he says he is. And I'm hoping for that. The point, though, is from a side of, him being threatened as the one trying to break all this down, because, the point is it could very well be some kind of a theater point, but this is very interesting to me. Taking it at face value for the sake of conversation, that this is Massey being threatened by the Trump administration, it kind of starts to make the picture look like what people are, largely leaning toward. And it's not just the Republicans or just Trump, but at the moment, they're in the hot seat. And so they don't want this to come out. So you'll find this interesting if you haven't seen it, that apparently they said, you better play ball or we're going to go after you.
Also, I'm going to say this here on camera because it's important. One of Kash Patel's staff threatened my staff with a criminal investigation if we didn't straighten up and play ball.
I was going to ask you about that, but since you brought it up, and I didn't,
I'm bringing it up.
Okay, you brought it up.
And so, like a criminal investigation having nothing to do, he said it was going to be a fraud. We're going to investigate one of your staff for fraud. Right. And he told another one of my staff this: if you guys don't straighten up, if you want to play hardball, if this is how you want to play it or something like that, this member of your staff is going to get criminally investigated for fraud. A very specific threat.
Now, there's only a few ways you take that, right? Now, obviously, one of them could be that he's making it up. It's hard. Could be, obviously, but doesn't seem like the likely choice with what he's been doing and the evidence in front of you, but consider it. Now, the other part of it, the two things I consider. One is that you have somebody who you think is committing fraud, right? That's the least likely, in my opinion. But so they're going, oh, you're committing fraud over there. We're looking at you, but we don't care. But we will decide to care if you don't do what we want, right? That's corruption in whichever way you look at it. We're not going to go after the guy we probably weren't going to look at anyway because we're all corrupt and everyone's committing fraud, but we're going to go after him if you don't do what we like. Okay, the other way to look at it is that they're going to go after somebody for nothing because he doesn't play ball. We're going to manufacture a fraud investigation if you don't play ball, which makes much more sense with what you've already seen, not unique to Trump's administration, but they're very bad and clumsy at it. So that's kind of crazy, isn't it? Play ball with the Epstein files? Yes, he's not towing the line right now. Now, before we move to the next point, just wanted to shout this out for people that are watching so far, because we were touching in the beginning about the unprecedented amount of things that we deal with in this platform. We definitely need your support. So I'm going to quickly make a shout out for donations here for the platform. If you want it, this is our website. You could look at the top. You've got the donate page, Bitcoin, Litecoin, any kind of things like that. Subscribe Star, Cash App, or you can mail it directly with the address is on there. We definitely need your support right around this time, guys, because of these kind of things. But for those that are, I guess I haven't talked about it that much, but just to make it quick, an overview, there was somebody who recently, or more than one, but somebody basically had been supporting more than usual and ultimately ended up pulling that rug out. So we're back at a place where we're a little bit, basically I'm thinking about doing a fundraiser in the, after Christmas. We haven't done one in a couple of years, and I feel like it's a necessary time. But, the more you can support this platform, if you believe in what we're doing, we need your support. I usually, do it at the end every so often, but wanted to throw it out there because, it's one of those times, guys. I feel, what it is? I feel it coming down right now, like lawsuit stuff, just everything. I try to keep that off the show, but it is happening. Back to the point. So you might have seen this. This came out December 12th. New Epstein's photos released by Democrats show Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, but I don't know why this would be surprising. There's probably 50 pictures. I'm probably less than that, but there's a lot of pictures of Trump and Epstein out there for multiple years. Epstein's on record saying he was his closest friend for 10 years. There's so many things that challenge the general point that the team makes about, I kicked him out and then we were done. It's just not true. Now, that doesn't mean he raped kids. I don't see the evidence for that, but it's certainly possible, and we should ask the question applied to anybody that was overlapped with this. But this is interesting for a couple of reasons because, Democrats show, therefore people on the team are going to go, then it's weaponized. Well, okay, maybe, probably because they want to use it to aim at Trump. Does it mean it's fake? Are you going to ignore the information because they put it, yes, in a lot of ways for partisans. But also Bannon, which I think is kind of funny. Just that's what somebody else posted. Steve Bannon, Democrats are scared of the Epstein files being released. Also Steve Bannon. There's a bunch of pictures with him in this, which is pretty uncomfortable. I don't know how he's addressing that. I don't watch his show, but, interesting over the overlap. But, my opinion on this is that this is not changing the conversation. This is like the grabby, out of the like kind of propagandized, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's meant to grab you and catch you and divert you away from the real picture. It's gawk. They want you to gawk at like pictures of them together. It doesn't change the story. But there is a story here, and everyone seems to know that, including them, which maybe that's what this was really about. Last point on this, because we're going to continue to follow wherever this goes. Polymarket says, breaking, Trump to sign executive order reclassifying marijuana on Monday. Now, I looked at this does not seem to, right now it seems like he may. That was the statement, like, I'm thinking about it. That's where it's at right now. Maybe something happens on Monday. But I just thought it was funny. This guy says, bro, trying everything to get people to forget about the files. Whether that's what that is or not, it's funny that that's how everyone seems to be regarding it. But when I looked into it briefly, since it's brought up for this point, apparently he's thinking about moving it to Schedule 3, which is just the stupidest, ridiculous. That's not a positive thing. Maybe it's an inch away from the worst situation, but it's still scheduled. It's not a dangerous thing. It's Schedule 1 right now, which means no medical purposes and highly addictive. You realize cocaine is Schedule 2. It's insane. And this is one of the points from the beginning. Everyone knows that's not true. And then you got Sessions and other ridiculous Republicans who act like it's reefer madness. And still, people like Megyn Kelly, people still act like it's... Now, that always gets me going. Plenty of things. I might as well just grab that show for you. I think this is a long time ago, by the way, and it's still very valid. Top 10 marijuana myths that no one should believe. I mean, it's all the buzzword. I mean, almost every single major lie, gateway, everything, guys, all the bigger claims. It's just, other than maybe that it makes you hungry, and that's not even everybody. It's just ridiculous. On top of the fact that we don't even talk about, the real point should not even be about whether you want to smoke it. That's your right. But the medicinal and I mean, every other thing around it that's not about just getting high would change the world quite literally. But anyway, I digress. This topic is important because of how much misinformation, and this is where TLAV generally started, around cannabis law reform. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about the Israel infiltration conversation. Just a brief one, a couple of, some of the points, and it won't take that long to set the table before we talk about Bondi Beach. Now, this is just interesting. This is Donald Trump. And this is specifically about Iran, but even that conversation, when that was happening, when we were going, he's doing that for Israel, we were called conspiracy theorists. We were called racist, I guess. And here he is saying, yep, that's what I did. So just simple point, right? We were right when we said that. And it was obvious when it was happening, but the teams, Benny Johnson, Alex Jones, all the rest of them were like, same way they're doing it now for Venezuela. And they're either lying or misinforming.
Great power. And we helped Israel a lot. We were shooting down the drones. We were doing a lot of things for Israel. We did a good job for Israel. But Israel did a good job. They fought. And they all fought bravely. Look, it's a war. That's a vicious war.
No, it's not. It's not a war. It's a genocide. Right? It's not a war when you're doing a one-sided mass killing. That's not what we're talking about. But see, it has to be called a war by him because he's conducting it. That's the truth, guys. The U.S. government, along with other Western nations, are completely complicit in every single thing that's happening there. Funding, arming, gaslighting, 100%. So it's just a war. It's a gruesome war, and they're bad guys, and we're fighting for freedom, whatever the common narratives are. But it was for Israel, like we told you. It always is, guys. That's what we're dealing with right now. That's what Americans are finally starting to come to terms with. Not for America, for Tel Aviv. How is that America first? Now, you may argue, well, it's an ally. Okay, fine. Then just argue it's not always America first. That sometimes it's Israel first. And then we'll be on the same page, even though it's pretty much always Israel first, but you'll be going in the right direction. But see, right now, that's not the conversation. But you see, this is what we're dealing with. The reason that I think people like Trump are doing this, even in the case where it makes him to like a degree, something I never would have predicted, that Trump would make himself look stupid almost on purpose, or that he would not, he's always narcissistic. He's always trying to take credit, except in a few anomalous situations where he seems to do the thing that makes him look like an idiot, and it's in the benefit of Israel. I mean, I guess it could mean something else, but that's pretty clear, isn't it? That shows me that somebody else is making those decisions and he doesn't have a choice. That's my opinion. But here's an example. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan, International Criminal Court, says that the UK threatened to defund the court and withdraw from the founding treaty if it pursued arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and Gland. The two people that everyone sees committing genocide. So that's not a public conversation. So this is just a bigger picture of the UK. You think that's their decision? Stepping up and going, if you go after them, these other leaders of a different country, we're going to shut you down. Is that because they were fighting for freedom? It's quite obvious what we're talking about here in a large scale, that Israel is infiltrating in pulling strings around the globe to the point of the ICC being threatened if it chooses to go after them for the crimes they're committing. In regard to what's going on the ground, to understand why, before we get into a Bondi beach conversation, if that was an organic event, which is possible, not to justify it, not to claim it's okay. Killing human beings and violence is never justifiable to me unless you're defending yourself. We're talking about a world in which people are literally being told that killing children, raping and torturing and murdering people is okay. And not only okay, that you're heroes for doing so, that we're the ones saving the world while we do all this. That causes people to lose it, and rightly so. Not in the sense that that's acceptable, that we should justify what they did if that's what happened, but you understand why if that's organic. Because we see this happening. People are literally, or the overlap with Palestinians themselves, watching their families get killed for decades and then being told they're the terrorists. People will react. So personally, I think there's much more to the story, but it's worth understanding just the simple surface level possibility of why people might act that way when they're being told, and in many cases in the surface level conversation, that the Jews did this. You could literally have people in the Knesset saying, remember that the Jews did this about the genocide. And that's not what happened. It's Zionism. There's plenty of Jewish people standing up and going, I do not support this. You guys are Zionists. I don't support Zionism. Orthodox Jewish communities around the world. The point, though, is that they shove that in the face, then people then turn around and go, I'm going to attack this event. But see, the important part is that there's an overlap of intelligence, of many things, Chabad, for example, and other examples that are bigger than just a gathering. But it is important to understand that larger point. It's why, for example, you had people that would act out during the Iraq war, guys, because this is not okay. What our governments are doing is terrorism. It's pretty simple. Whether in Venezuela, in Syria, they're working with the worst people everywhere you look. And it wasn't just Trump. They're just very bad at hiding it. After the hanging noose pin worn by the members of, I showed you the little pin. Remember, it was the little flag first, the yellow flag or the yellow ribbon. Well, now they turned it into a yellow noose. Now, I showed you that on the pins that were being worn by Smoke or Ben Gvir and his team. They were trying to kind of make it quiet. So it kind of looked like the pin from farther away, but you look close and it was a little yellow noose. And it turns out that they're saying, okay, now that hostages are gone, kill them all. Guess what? We told you that from the beginning. You know why? Because they were saying that. It's not complicated. People just lie. Now, people first were saying, oh, it's just them. They made a choice. Okay, well, turns out it's not. Now it's on IDF members who are out there committing genocide. A noose. You see how that happens? You see how obvious and clear this is? Like the first point, guys. Everyone knows what this is. They're bragging about it. And yet you get told you're lying. You get told that that's not true, or you're misunderstanding, or it means justice for the terrorists. No, it doesn't. He will tell you that. Listen to Ben Gvir. But you see, the media will tell you what you're supposed to think about it. And why do you think that is? This was always the intention, I wrote. You know how I know that? Because countless Israeli politicians, media personalities, soldiers, and online commentators outright told you that repeatedly. Then bragged about it repeatedly. It takes a special kind of willful ignorance to hide from this. And this person says, hey, Grok, more proof of genocide. Now provide cover for their behavior and protect the master narrative when we all know they're committing genocide. It's funny. Just you can read the responses. It's just funny. It's like trying to equivocate exactly like he thought. On top of that, this is the kind of thing they're still doing. Now, do you remember this from the beginning? In the first couple months, I guess, when they were like, oh, here's chemical weapons, what was it? Chemical weapons instructions, and it turned out to be some CD-ROM from Amazon. I'm not even making that up. Or it's a list on the calendar. Nope, just a calendar. Everyone proved that. They lied so blatantly. Beheaded babies on a clothesline, lie. All of them proven, and yet we're still acting like we could take at face value what they say. Well, guess what, guys? This is not new. This is reposted. This is right vivid on December 12th. The IDF found Nazi books in almost every home in Gaza. No, they didn't. That's ridiculous. It's not, the reality of the ideological differences, even of Hamas and the rest of them, it's insane. They know they're lying about this and they never proved it. First of all, secondarily, it just logically doesn't even make sense. These are the idea that they're white nationalists. Like, what are you talking about? Or rather, I shouldn't even say it like that. That's the term. They're white supremacists, but literally, and by the way, to be clear, that's just the terms I've made very clear over the years that nationalism is not necessarily a racist thing. It's simply, it could overlap with that, or you could just believe deeply in your own country. But literally nobody believes this. She said the entire Gaza Strip is rubble, but somehow you found a Mein Kampf. Be serious. You actually expect people to buy this propaganda story? No, guys, nobody believes this other than the fringe. I shouldn't say nobody then, but, a very, very small percentage of people that seem to just go, oh, okay, whatever they said. It's like the generation that if it's in the newspaper, it must be real. Like, there are people like that exist. Dylan Williams says, Congressman Randy Fine should face expulsion or at the very least censor the removal of the House Foreign Affairs Committee for advocating to, quote, destroy the Palestinian people. In a congressional hearing today, he did openly. That's acceptable. If you went up there and said destroy if you make this, let's just make it the Palestinian people, the Palestinian state, or just Gaza. If they stood up anybody and said destroy Israel or destroy any country other than, they would lose their minds because there's a double standard, quite obviously. Such vile racism and genocidal incitement has no place in Congress. Except it does. I mean, it shouldn't, but it does. They do it all the time. Literally, now you got Laura Loomer sitting in at these meetings. She's screaming how Muslims shouldn't exist and shouldn't be in Congress. But here are some of the posts he has. May the streets of Gaza overflow with the blood of these animals. These animals live in Florida, hopefully not for long. There is no suffering adequate for these animals. May the streets of Gaza overflow with blood. Or the post where somebody says, you can sleep with this, and shows him a dead baby, and he goes, like a baby. Or something disgusting like that. This guy is literally in Congress. How do we not see what that shows us? Or here's an example. First of all, what's interesting to me is that this is the image. This is what they posted. Now, it's funny to me that doesn't show up right here. In fact, if you click it, oops, wrong one. It tends to, before it was showing up as blank. And there's another example of that. Twitter's acting funky today. I think it's right. I'll come back to it. The point of this, though, as I said, everything about Zionism is fake. They posted this. Ellie Efrat saying, it's that simple. It says, I'm an Arab woman. I can go to university. I can be a doctor. I can run for office. Oh, you mean this fake woman from the free pick stock image? You could look it up for yourself. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true, but it isn't true. You can quite literally prove that that's not the case. You can even ask Ethiopian Jewish people that live in Israel that they're treated like second-class citizens. It's not the reality, guys. Israelis will tell you that. Orthodox Jews that live in Israel will tell you that. Point, though, is that they have to post this as using a fake picture to sell you on the idea that it is what they claim it's not, or it isn't. How do I confuse myself there? They post a fake picture to convince you that it's something that it's not. Now, we played the Avi Schleim clip many times, telling you what Zionism truly is. It's very clear that these people are lying about this, the double standard that exists there. It's all around. Now, overlapping this with the clear societal kind of governmental thing, we have the actual technological side. And this is technological and governance. Former Israeli spies now overseeing U.S. government cybersecurity. Guys, it's 70 plus agencies where you have Israeli Unit 8200 spies working within the U.S. government. The Gray Zone covered this. It's very easy to recognize. They just act like it's okay. We're allies, right? Is it okay if there's British spies packed through the U.S. government? No, that wouldn't be okay. Why is it okay if Israel does it? We talked about the discussion of smartphones, largely Samsung, but it was a lot of different overlaps. Intelexa, an Israeli company, but they claim it's not a government thing, but it very much is, and you can prove it. Smartphones worldwide silently infected with Israeli spyware. Lauren Witzke points out, why did 2 AIPAC employees give top secret U.S. intel to Israel? More than once, by the way. It's not an old story. It's the overlapping point that goes back a long way, even before, like the nuclear technology conversation to China is not that new, but it's been known for quite a long time. Why did one of these AIPAC employees once say, quote, we could have the signature of every senator on a blank cocktail napkin if we wanted to? Why did the former president of AIPAC get caught boasting that he had, quote, a dozen people in the Clinton admin and, quote, cut a deal with George Bush? You can read all this for yourself. I mean, this is just her discussing the overlapping point, but these are very public conversations. Here's AIPAC saying, why is Tucker welcoming a woman who's under U.S. sanctions for illegally trying to investigate? They're talking about Francesca Albanese. She's a U.S. rapporteur. And the sanctions are because of ridiculous U.S. sanctions targeting her because she's calling out Israel. I mean, this is straight up bullying terrorism tactics. But the point is that what they're doing in every possible way, AIPAC, which is an Israeli platform, it is an Israeli company, an origin. You can prove it. Wikipedia will show you that. But today we call it an American company. No, it's literally one of the overlapping reasons why people argue JFK was killed. They were trying to register under FARA, and then he got killed. That didn't happen. You could argue that's not why, but that's a very real fact. Now the one I played in the beginning. This is John Kirkow telling you about 187 Mossad agents are currently spread all across America. After time, I'm just going to leave it there for you. Played at the beginning. But he says Jeffrey Epstein was absolutely, positively working for Mossad. 187 Mossad agents undesignated or unacknowledged. They claim there's only 2 on record, and they say you can prove 187 of them working in clandestine operations inside the United States. Why should that surprise us? And this clip,
says in so many words.
Play this again in case you didn't see it, because this is important to understand, guys. This is what we're talking about, is this kind of manufacturing of events, manipulating supply chains to our favor, making fake companies that no one can recognize.
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
This is Mossad's old office. Its motto from Proverbs 24:6 says in so many words, wage war through deception and trickery.
Here is a clip from James Lee saying, when I watch this, all I can think about is the fact that Israel has the quote, the alleged, he writes, or with whatever, I guess that would be quotes, I guess, with stars, alleged capability to detonate any of these devices remotely at any given time, should we ever step out of line. Here's the clip. This is a new AIPAC commercial.
It's the start of a new day. And thanks to Israeli innovation, our journey will be made easier. I'll show you the sky. Our connections clearer. No looking down. Our food more plentiful and nourishing. Open your eyes. Our oceans cleaner. Far from the ground, no looking down. Our communities safer. When you come across that mountain and the top seems out of reach. Our loved ones healthier. Put you right back on your feet, and we can take it one step at a time. We can take it one step till we get it right. From morning to night, whatever the challenge, Israel is America's partner for a better future.
Interesting. Now, of course, you could argue that's just benign, right? It certainly could be. But let me show you a couple things that might add to the picture. Again, he clearly gets the point. In Gaza, we already saw this, right? Mobile phone. Well, first of all, in case you guys are new to the show, and not hopefully you didn't miss this event, but the discussion of the pager attack, right? That was what that clip was from in regard to Mossad speaking with 60 Minutes. They were describing how they make fake companies and manipulate other countries using the, infiltration. So I discussed this in this show back in 2024, Israel's infiltration of the U.S. tech in light of the Lebanon pager attack. And the reality is alarming, and we're getting into part of it today. But so that being said, in Gaza, November, mobile phones were sent in by Israel. And people were like, that's weird. Why'd they do that? And then inexplicably, they started blowing up. Simple, guys. It's very easy to see what this is. And so this is why this gets even more alarming. Before we even play the Mossad point, remember what Netanyahu said to 250 U.S. congressmen. Now, I've talked about this. I briefly played it once, but let me play this clip for you again. Remember the context, guys. And what's the most important part to me is that he's literally, and you play the full thing to make sure that you don't think I'm somehow taking this out of context. It's very clearly not. You can play it. I've included the YouTube video. He's talking about weapon systems and how good, he even makes a joke before this about how good we are at weapons. And then just randomly goes, I'll play it for you. The setting being weapons, okay? Listen to what he says.
Our weapon systems we share with the United States. We're tremendously appreciative of the bipartisan support and military.
Always bipartisan.
Matters to Israel in previous years and today as well. But do you have cell phones? You have cell phones here? No? You're holding a piece of Israel right there. You know that?
Now, guys, watch this. I said this the first time. It comes out of nowhere. He goes on to be like cherry tomatoes, which is not even true, by the way. Cherry made in Israel. So where did that even come from? Why it's this out of nowhere point? Weapon systems, and we're great with weapons. And then you got phones? That's a piece of Israel right there. That's exactly what happened. Now, I could be off base here. To me, with what we know and what was already going on, with all the different examples, and also with what I'm going to play next, to me, that stands out as stay in line. These people know what we're talking about, guys. Most of these politicians know of the Samson option, know of what Israel's doing, know that they have to bow to these things. Some politicians, some of them have told you this. People like John Kirkow will tell you this. People like Wilkerson will tell you the insane infiltration of Israel taking over the Pentagon, for example. But what he's saying right there is quite obvious to me. Now, think of it and this is even what TRT World picked up on. Netanyahu to U.S. lawmakers, your cell phone medicines carry Israel's mark. It's a weird thing to say. Now, keeping that in mind, listen to what the ex-chief of Mossad said.
Any surprises in Gaza?
Surprises?
Yeah.
You mean intelligence surprises?
Pages, walkie-talkies. Do you know how many treated equipment do we have in these countries? You don't. I do.
You mean you mean booby-trapped equipment?
Not only booby-trapped.
And spying.
Manipulated equipment. All right?
In which countries are you talking about? In
all the countries that you can imagine.
How does something like that get stated in a massively seen podcast and not completely change the conversation? Because the conversation is hijacked. Has been for a long time. The reason that Benny Johnson, Nick Sorter, and Jones and whatever their counterparts are on the ridiculous left, why they're not talking about this is because their job is not to. That's how, and whether they know that or not, that must be clear by now. That's insane. You literally just said you've got booby-trapped. That was his word, the podcaster, and he responded. Booby-trapped equipment in every country you can imagine. After we just saw them execute the pager attack in Lebanon that they claim circulated for 10 years and killed mostly women and children, injured mostly women and children as well. I mean, it's absolutely flooring. And I've shown you this before, but this gets into the larger point just to think about what they're capable of. I really want to listen to this again.
Surprises?
Yeah.
You mean intelligence surprises?
Pages, walkie-talkies. Do you know how many treated equipment do we have in these countries?
Treated equipment.
You don't. I do.
You mean booby-trapped equipment?
Not only booby-trapped.
And spying.
Manipulated equipment.
Spying.
All right. In which countries are you talking about?
In all the countries that you can imagine.
All countries that you can imagine. And it goes, but not Gaza, which, by the way, is ridiculous. This is a threat. The only reason you would say something like that is to make sure people get the message. they're floundering right now. Israel is absolutely floundering. Everyone sees what's going on. They're tripling down with the support of the countries that everyone also sees as doing this. It's the only reason this has not completely fallen apart for them is because of the control they have over these institutions. It just has to be acknowledged how clear that is. And this is a threat. That's my opinion, but I don't know how that can get any more clear. As Kavork Almasian says, I don't know about you, but when the former head of Mossad sits down before a camera and boasts about booby trapping and spying on electric equipment all over the world, we should stop pretending this is normal. Yes. Absolutely insane, guys. Now, an overlapping point, which is concerning, because this goes back in the same conversation when you really understand the Vault 7 release. First of all, 7Cs points out this discussion. He says, according to Arizona state law, where this accident took place, this was a random, this happened. Remember, I used to make jokes about how this happens every other day. It's still crazy to me how these self-driving cars for Teslas can crash the way they do and somehow just nothing changes, because you need to understand that this was always about something bigger than just Teslas. Elon Musk is a government contractor. He always has been. This is part of the Great Reset. And the reality was all about whether it's the 3D mapping, surveillance, any number of overlapping things, or testing out the self-driving electric vehicles, knowing there was going to be a learning curve, right? But it's just wild to me. But in Arizona, an accident took place where a Tesla swerved into oncoming traffic, and it's in full self-driving mode. The operator of the vehicle is still entirely liable, according to law, and may be issued a traffic citation or other acceptable penalty if the vehicle fails to comply with traffic or motor vehicle laws. Meaning that effectively, your self-driving car can attempt to kill you, or any number of different possibilities, and then you would still be found at fault for whatever happened. That's ridiculous. And this is one where they're just an example of not the laws not catching up with technocracy, but I think it's more by design in that. And he also puts out, writes, recently, Tesla has asked a federal judge to prohibit the NHTSA from releasing data about crashes related to the use of full self-driving and autopilot. Now, why would they do that? You can argue it's because they don't want to be held accountable, which is certainly possible, and likely even. But there seems to be more to this story, guys, because it seems like they don't want something to be seen in what's going on there. Now, just to overlap this was Vault 7, WikiLeaks. Hacking tools revealed. As of October 2014, the CIA has also been looking at infecting the vehicle control systems used by modern cars and trucks. 2014. The purpose of such control is not specified, but it would permit the CIA and presumably Mossad, who seems to be mashed together, to engage in nearly undetectable assassinations. Remember that? It's a very famous case, guys, that still people don't like to relate. The CIA's mobile device branch developed numerous attacks to remotely hack and control popular smartphones. Infected phones can be instructed to send the CIA the user's geolocation, audio and text communications, as well as covertly activate the phone's camera microphone. That was 2014. Now, we've already talked about I always forget, was zero click, I think. That's Israel leading that way. They're the leader in the conversation of sending things to phones just like this, and you don't even have to engage with it. It just instantly infects the phone and can do who knows what. There's still debates about whether they're able to make a phone explode without actually having something inside of it. This is the article from Mashable. The CIA is interested in hacking your car, WikiLeaks claims. Now, lastly, just to overlap this, because we're going to get more into technocracy and surveillance, but this one says in China, there's fully autonomous police vehicles that patrol cities 24/7. They're equipped with 360-degree cameras, facial recognition, loudspeakers, flashing lights, and sometimes thermal imaging and other sensors. They can automatically detect facial recognition, license plates, jaywalking, no helmet, blah, 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 the technocracy, right? And he makes an excellent point. We have these in the United States. They're called Teslas. Very much worth considering. This is really what I see happening here, because Americans have been very resistant to a lot of things for a while. Or maybe we just think highly of ourselves. Who knows? But the point is that they can't just come out and be like, we're going to surveil you all the time. It has to be a narrative. We're going after immigrants, for example, right? In this case, we don't want self-driving Skynet robots, because everyone was resistant to that. So They roll it out for something different. What's the actual material difference? Think about it for a second. Now, we'll come back to the technocracy. Let's talk about Bondi Beach. Now, this is Al Jazeera, the first one that I saw. Let's go over this conversation. Let's just engage with the article first, and we'll go over some of the weird anomalous points and all this. Now, I want to start by, like I do often with these events that are happening in real time. It's still developing. Anyone out there acting like they absolutely know for sure, which there's always a gaggle of those people, don't, guys. There's always developing information. There's always new. Right now, in the midst of this, that hasn't even fleshed out yet. It's sort of how when the Tyler Robinson thing happened, or whether whoever the Israel assassination took place, it was that guy in the blue shirt, and they all were like, "We knew it. It's a boomer lefty," and that wasn't even the guy. And then they just kept that narrative until the next one came around. That's just, again, that's the first point again. That's insanely obvious. Everyone noticed that, and that was left, though. We knew it. So right now, you have all these people doing the same thing as you always do. You have people now out there trying to jump ahead of this and tell you it's an IDF agent or IDF member, which doesn't at the moment appear to be the case. It appears to be a overlapping connection, but I'm going to get into my thoughts about what's likely behind all this, whether or not this person's an IDF agent. But that's one side of it, where that came out because people want to lean into their narrative without evidence, or it was circulating and people went into it. On the other hand, you got people coming out and doing what you expect from the right. All the people we like to mention coming out and saying, we knew it, it's an anti-Semitic attack against Jews, and it's a Palestinian or it's a Iranian overlap, or both at the same time. Always the same thing. Muslim, even though it was actually a Muslim who saved them. We'll get into all of it. At least 15 kills. Oh, and again, the real point was, as always, guys, but this is why you're here, because you probably already do this. Show discernment, right? Be patient. Don't jump to conclusions. That's exactly what the power structure wants from you. Look at the information, come to your conclusions about it, and recognize that we don't have the full picture yet. But you can say what you think. I'm going to say what I think. But people out there acting like we already know, and absolutely, it's like them right now. Even people like Crowder and the rest acting like Tyler Robinson's guilty. Guys, it hasn't even happened yet. Aren't we supposed to be in a country where we're guilty or innocent until proven guilty, even though we know that's really not how it works? We're supposed to pretend that. They don't. On top of the fact that we just don't know. He hasn't even pled guilty yet, which I find strange. He had his first hearing or second, I think, and still not, arguably means he's not claiming he's guilty. And so we don't know, but yet they're going to tell you that. Just think about how weird this is. So it's at least 15 killed in shooting at Jewish festival at Sydney's Bondi Beach. One of the suspects also killed in the attack in Sydney, while another is in custody in critical condition. Now, 2 gunmen have attacked a Jewish festival at Sydney's popular Bondi Beach, killing at least 15 people and wounding dozens, according to Australian authorities. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the, quote, devastating mass shooting on Sunday, which police are calling a terrorist incident, was a targeted attack on Jewish Australians on the first day of Hanukkah. Now, look, it was a Jewish gathering, and it was on the first day of Hanukkah. But what is the jump to make it about an attack on Jewish people? Like, yes, that's obviously one of the likely scenarios because of those 2 things. But is it not also possible, before we know for sure, that this is just a guy who lost his mind? Or 2 people that decided to just go on a rampage and it wasn't, and they just happened? Even though that's more unlikely than the possible, then that is still one of the possibilities. That's my point I'm trying to make. It gets immediately called an anti-Semitic attack on Jews when at the moment, that's one of the most likely, but at the end of the day, there's other possibilities. Like, what if they were going after them because there was an Israeli connection? That wouldn't be about Jewish people then, even though that's the way they try to push that. Or, like I said, it's possible that there's just random people that lost their minds and decided to attack them. Or, anyway, you could make any number of possible things. The point is, the jump to make that case is what in its own way diminishes the real things like that. Now, that's not to say that that might be what this is. But in the moments where you see that weaponized effort by the media and everyone else to immediately make that the case, when otherwise it was just somebody who carried something out and it turned out to be a Jewish person, they make it about that's an agenda. But consider that may be the case. It could just be people who hate Jews and want to go out there and kill them. That's also possible. It goes on to say 40 people remain in hospital following the shooting, according to New South Wales police station. One of the alleged shooters was killed. And I'll show you the video of this here, the guy who saved everybody. Now, I mean, like, again, to stand up and be super objective, maybe that's something that's part of this big play. But, if we don't ever have evidence to back that up, then that shouldn't be something you assume. Right now, it stands to reason that these were two people that were killing people, which seems to be in some very weirdly organized. You're going to see the video of this guy shooting. This guy knows how to shoot a gun. Something really weird about that to me in regard to being in Australia where most people don't. There's something off about this whole thing. But the guy that ultimately saved him, his name is it was Al Ahmed, I believe, risked his life and literally tackled this guy, knowing there's another shooter, by the way, and saved the day. And I find it interesting that they're trying to make this about some kind of like Muslim attack on Jews when this guy is the one that saved everybody. But it goes on to say, ABC spoke to a witness who described seeing two black-clad armed men, standing on a bridge shooting at crowds who had gathered for the event. Black-clad, of course, that could just be what they dressed in, but it feels very relevant to the Antifa sort of black bloc, that kind of a thing, which is the kind of running thing right now. It's funny how it kind of escalates, or rather evolves. You know what I mean? At first, it was like Palestinian and Hamas, and then it was Antifa's the focus, and now everything's overlapped with that. There's so much going on in our world today that is very much manipulated. Doesn't mean it always starts from whole cloth, but things happen, and then the government lies on top of it almost every time for many different reasons. It's worth understanding that. Continuing. Oh, thank you. I was just checking. Bondi. That's funny, though. It's funny that I mentioned that person I knew that demanded that you call her Courtney, even though her name was just Courtney. A restaurant. I worked with her a long time ago at a restaurant. I'm kind of just making a joke, but is it just, could you just say Bondi? Why would it be Bondi? Is that an Australian thing? Anyway, I'll call it Bondi just because that's what they said. But continuing, where were we? It says, quote, if it was shocking, it felt like 10 minutes of just bang, bang, bang. Now that stands out to me. Now, of course, that could be their impression. But we're talking about a place where it's very uncommon that a shooting takes place because they've taken all the guns away, which is what people tend to argue is like why you should advocate for guns being removed. But it is not. At the end of the day, first of all, it's something that Americans recognize, as the Constitution outlines, as an inherent right. You disagree with that, then we've had that conversation plenty of times. But the reality is still the same. But on top of that, to understand what that means when you have an unarmed population, look back through history, guys. You end up being manipulated. It leads to the inevitable, what's the right word for it? Just decline of this. Like the government takes advantage of the population, and there's way worse ways to frame that. It happens every time. Look at Australia right now. Look at the UK. Look at what they're doing. It's the same kind of thing we're going through, but it's way more aggressive and in your face. That's why. I mean, that's my opinion anyway. But so the point is that I wanted to make that point, but the point is about the shooting and that he was able to keep shooting for this long. It just makes you wonder whether there was more involved there. Like, why wouldn't something, is there not more? I don't know. It could just be that there was nobody around, but I just feel like that stands out as keeping a note until more information comes along. And when we start to get the background story of where the police were and what was happening, maybe that'll be more relevant. And he says it seemed like a powerful weapon. Dramatic footage aired by Al Jazeera showed a bystander in a car park tackling one of the suspects and snatching his gun. The video then shows the suspect losing his footing and backing away towards the bridge where another shooter was located. While the bystander, identified by local media as 43-year-old fruit shop owner Ahmed Al-Ahmed, places the gun down on the ground. Quote, a man walking up to the gunman who had fired on the community and single-handedly disarming him, putting his own life at risk to save the lives of countless other people. This man is a genuine hero, and I've got no doubt that there are many, many people alive tonight as a result of his bravery. Now, it's interesting, even right now, to look at the lack of praise and coverage from a lot of the conversation for that man. I mean, do I even need to explain why that is? It's pretty disgusting when you really break down how obvious it is. So I guess it's just not okay to praise him because he's an evil Muslim, whatever the loomer types are going to, that's what we're getting. It's very strange to me. But what it stands out to me as something that is kind of anomalous, the situation. If this was an engineered event, then that doesn't work for the event. That ruins the story, doesn't it? Interesting. Countries around the world, including Britain, Italy, Iran, Qatar, and the United States, also denounced the attack. Now, there's this overlap with Iran involved, like the argument being there's an Iranian connection in some way. It's the narratives coming from the typical people. Because, ultimately it means whoever they want. Hezbollah or Houthis, Hamas, well, it's all Iran. No, it's not. It just simply isn't. On top of the fact that Hamas was funded by Israel, and then nobody wants to talk about that. But the overarching point is that it's been kind of condemned by most people. That doesn't necessarily mean they're not involved, but also kind of, saying if Iran's involved, they come out and condemn it in the harshest terms. But it says, speaking alongside his wife, Melania, during a Christmas celebration at the White House, Trump called the incident a purely anti-Semitic attack. I mean, how much you want to bet he doesn't even look? This was something that he was told about, and that's how he responded, because that's the way they're supposed to respond. How would you know that, Trump? Do you know their motivations? Just because they're Jewish people or a Jewish event does not therefore mean that's what it was. Like I said, certainly likely based on those circumstances, but it's an assumptive thing. And that's the point about Robinson and the rest. They set their narrative, just like with COVID-19. Trump grabbed the microphone and said, China did it, they did it, we did it, before anybody had any information, because that's what they wanted you to think, guys. It's very clumsy when you think about it. Quote, we repeat our alerts time and again to the Australian government to seek action and fight against the enormous wave of anti-Semitism, which is plaguing Australia's society, Trump said. Or no, excuse me, it was the Israeli president. A leading Australian Islamic organization condemned the Bondi Beach shooting as a horrific act of violence. Now, again, Islamic organization, it's kind of like that's the response to that is like that's just them covering somehow for some larger conspiracy. Gun violence in crowded public spaces is rare in Australia, particularly in an area like Bondi Beach, which is heavily policed. That was the point that stood out to me, right? How would they end up shooting this long? So we're thinking about. So that's the general overview. So Mel points something out. Now, if this is just all, like I said, developing today, so if there's something you stand out and important to you, let me know. This is Orson Ostrovsky. He's allegedly a human rights lawyer who supports genocide and actively supports starving people to death and raping and torturing and whatever else is going on in Israel. He's all for it. He survived October 7th. So we're told, right? Here's the post. I lived through October 7th. Never imagined I'd see this horror in Australia. This is what he looked like on the climb October 7th. Now, just personally, the way that looks to me does not feel that feels like it's almost like it's insulting. Like that does not look like, that looks like an injury you put together for a movie show. That's my opinion, because it's very interesting when you look at the way he looked today. Now, who's to say? Maybe they're both real. It's certainly worthy of consideration. But this guy has been caught outright lying about major things, and he has been connected deeply to the larger apparatus for quite a long time. So you have to wonder whether this is exactly what you might consider. So he survived 10/7 and then Bondi Beach. He says, that's wild. Same as the girl from Brown yesterday who also survived Parkland. Crazy times. Which is true, by the way. We'll briefly overlap that. Alan says, I know when I get shot and I'm laying down hiding, the first thing I do is pull out my phone, turn on a filter, take a few pictures, select the best one, and then edit said pic to put some please help text there. It's first day tactical awareness stuff. Now, obviously, you could argue that he added the text later, but really? You're being possibly killed or, executed, and you're going to stay. I mean, it just doesn't really make sense. But, maybe today, that's a point that made before. The world we're in today, maybe it does. Maybe that's what people just do now with their phones. But it does seem a little bit counterintuitive. And she says, isn't that everyone's first instinct? But I just want to really stress the fact that I've literally proven to you that this guy has been lying about very major events, provably lying to you. And so it should stand to reason that he could be lying now. But I'm not saying we can prove that. On top of the fact that the overlap does seem interesting to me, what are the odds? Now, Elon Levy, he only moved back to Australia 2 weeks ago. What a coincidence. To fight the explosion of anti-Semitism there. Now, Ostrovsky was injured in the Bondi Beach air attack and bounced straight back to tell the media about the ordeal. Okay, wait a minute. That looks very similar. Joshua Hall writes, breaking, there are now 2 students who survived the shooting at Brown University in Rhode Island tonight that also supposedly survived the 2 other well-known mass shootings. Now this is just the overlap point. The odds of that feel astronomical to me. It says Zoe Wiseman, a Parkland survivor, and now Mia Tretta, a hardcore gun control and anti-Second Amendment activist who has met with disgraced former President Biden and just happened to be there tonight. This was on the 13th. Both have already been making the rounds on CNN. pushing the gun control agenda and the immediate aftermath of surviving yet another mass shooting. Does anyone actually believe that this is a coincidence? I mean, it could be. That is possible, but it seems highly unlikely. We are talking about two completely different parts of the country. Two allegedly repeat survivors of mass shootings years apart from one another. Call me a conspiracy theorist, guys, but something just isn't right about this. Now, it's wild to me that point is taken like it's just lunacy. Shouldn't it be like, yeah, that's wild? Like and not like we assume they're all lying and they should be called out, because that's also stupid, right? But the fact that we can't have a conversation about what are the odds of that? And how many times we see these. The point is, we know that there is stuff like this going on. Not about individuals, that does happen too. But my point is about the events that are manipulated. That's not debatable. It has and does happen. So I just find this also interesting with the timing of these overlaps, and all of it seems to be aimed around very particular conversations. Now, back to the point of Bondi Beach, here's Batari Worldwide, a group that's been conducting their own psychological operations. Brown University, the Brown point from Batari Worldwide, Brown University faculty and students have long wanted to globalize the Intifada. They've had success. The Intifada has been globalized. So they're trying to make this, that was the point, about this same conversation. And Mel points out on the 14th, how would a Zionist organization headquartered in Israel know who the Brown shooter was and what their motives were 15 hours before arrests were made? Now, you could argue they didn't. They just yelled what they wanted you to think. But either way, that's the point, isn't it? There's an organization going on here. This is an interesting overlap. Alex Rivchin says, seeing a group resembling an Al-Qaeda terror cell openly pledging to carry out criminal acts is chilling and disturbing. It doesn't matter what they think they're doing, something just and righteous, because basically saying that everybody thinks that way, right? Islamist terrorists and neo-Nazis think that way too. This is what matters, is that we remain a country of laws and not allow bands of zealots to decide what is a legitimate target for violence and criminal acts. I agree with that, except he's only talking about one side of the conversation. Today, it is a business they oppose, and tomorrow it'll be individuals, politicians, journalists, and religious institutions they deem impure. Yep, I agree, except I'm talking about Zionism, and they're doing that right now. We expect this incident to be investigated and for those responsible to be met with the law. It says, we have your addresses, chilling threat to MELB workers by anti-Israel cell. My point is, this is happening almost near simultaneously in multiple situations, which has kind of always been happening, but right now it's very, very in your face. This person says, hey, wasn't your house targeted in one of the synagogue arsons carried out by local with crimes who were paid in cryptocurrency? How did they know where you lived, Alex? And why are you now trying to blame these kind of attacks on an Islamic terror cell? You should be investigated for terrorism, not joking. Now, whether you agree with the last statement or not, it's weird how these things are happening. The point, though, is that it's about shoving the narrative into what you want it to be. What do you mean resembling an Al-Qaeda terror cell? Ignoring for the moment that both Israel and the United States quite literally work with and arm and mobilize those groups, and right now working and arm them and letting them run Syria. The idea that you just shove that into that point, and again, I don't want you to miss what he's outlining about these. I don't know whether he's, I didn't dive too deep through his back work, whether it's about Muslims or just anti-Israel stuff. The point is, he's describing what he claims is the people fighting against Israel. How do you not recognize what you just said? He says, it doesn't matter that they think they're doing something just and righteous. Islamist terrorists, neo-Nazis, Zionists, for example, think that too. Yep. What matters is that we remain a country of laws, I agree, and not allow bands of zealots, I agree, to decide what is a legitimate target for violence. Yep. You see, the idea that we can't apply that to any zealot, to any extremist, because I guess it's only extremism when the other side does it. Isn't that crazy? Back to the point. Here is the shooter. Now watch the way he is shooting this rifle. And look at it, the way he looks. I mean, these things are very relevant. Now, this is one of the reasons why people were calling him an IDF member of the IDF. Now, just because right now that seems to be based on something that people just threw together other than facts, doesn't mean it's still not the case. It certainly could be. But all I was saying in the beginning, as we'll get to, is it doesn't seem to be backed up by anything other than something circulating online. And the guy who they're currently claiming this is, unless that changed in the last hour, doesn't appear to be that guy. It's very weird overlap. But again, it's all up in the air right now. So tomorrow that might not be the case and things might change and more information might be added. But watch this clip. It's just the way right there. The way he's firing that. That is somebody who knows how to handle that weapon. And that's apparently the guy, one of the guys that were shooting. Chilling close-up shows Bondi Beach shooter firing like a professional. It just doesn't make so. Again, so at a place where there aren't weapons for the most part, it's not unlikely. This seems like somebody who's doing this for something other than just a random shooting. But again, just an opinion. Now, this is one of the examples. This was Pan-African Leagues. It says, Naveed Akram, who is the guy that seems to be the claim right now. That's from Sky News. Naveed Akram. It says, an IDF veteran who served in Gaza and returned to Australia opened fire on a Hanukkah celebration. Now, the best of my research, that doesn't seem to be the case. Unless it was scrubbed, which is possible. But the point is, nothing I can see that backs up that guy, this guy, the guy they're talking about is actually IDF. Now, maybe that guy is, who does not seem to be the same guy, does it? Interesting. But this one said, unless we're talking about the other guy, which I don't think I think they're from my research, again, up in the air at the moment, it seems that they're claiming this guy here is that guy. But this is apparently that guy. This is Khaleesi sharing it. Naveed Akram video exposing propaganda. I forgot to download this. It's only 2 minutes. Let's watch this real quick. He's basically saying it's not me. Now, obviously, he could be lying, right? Maybe, try not. But the guy in that video does not look like the one that they're comparing it to. But we've genuinely seen the mainstream media mistakenly use, compare it to the wrong person, for example. That's happened before. So it could very well just be that that's something that they're doing deliberately, or just they're that inept. Both are possible. Where was that? Here we go.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी एवरीवन मेरा नाम नवीद अकरम है और मैं सिडनी में रहता हूँ ऑस्ट्रेलिया में मैं यहाँ पे 2000
Oh, it's in that's too bad. So this is what she wrote here. It says Naveed Akram from Lahore, who lives in Sydney, came on camera to prove his identity and how some media platforms put his life in danger. But see, was that hold on.
18 में आया था और मैंने यहाँ से मास्टर्स किया और मैंने पाकिस्तान से बैचलर्स किया था मैं यहाँ पे अपनी कंपनी रन कर रहा हूँ रेंटल की और मुझे काफी टाइम हो गया यहाँ पे.
Yeah, no, he's not speaking English. I was making sure it wasn't an accent. I'm like, you must be speaking something else. I can't hear what he's saying. It says he basically proves identity, so he's claiming, and how some media platforms put his life in danger by circulating his picture. Now, who's to say that this has happened in the past where the mainstream alternative media are the ones that spin this out with the wrong person, which is what they do. And it says, translation, it says, my name is Naveed Akram, and according to Khaleesi, and I live in Sydney, Australia. I came here in 2018. Some Indian social media accounts took my photo from Facebook and spread propaganda, falsely claiming that I was the person who carried out the attack in Bondi Beach. I kindly request everyone to report these accounts as false propaganda could put my life in danger. Now, what's interesting, remember, I think it was, which one was that? There was one of the recent shooters, I forget which one, was doing something similar. Was going online, acting like, was trying to apologize. I didn't do that. And then it turned out that was the guy. But, that is not the guy we were just looking at, right? That's not the same guy. Here's Sky News. Gunman in horrific Bondi Beach terror attack identified as Naveed Akram after 16 victims killed and 29 more injured. So it's, I guess we'll see how this pans out by tomorrow. If not, let me know if something already changed in the chat. So this is an Iranian outlet. From false flag claims to celebration. Iran state media spins Sydney attack. That's how they're framing this, that the media is spinning it, but it's worth consideration. This is from an Iranian platform reporting on what the Iranian platform was saying. The messaging emerged even as Iran's foreign ministry issued a formal condemnation of the shooting at the Hanukkah event in Sydney that killed 16 people. It says Tasnim News, which is affiliated with the Revolutionary Guards, ran the story under a headline, at least 10 Zionists slain in Hanukkah festival in Australia, in what appeared to be a celebration of the deaths. The Revolutionary Guard affiliated Sabreen News also hailed the killing of British-born Rabbi Eli Schlanger, calling him a staunch supporter of Gaza genocide who met Zionist soldiers to voice his support for their war against Gaza. Now, again, the idea that that's not an unlikely motivation. That somebody, if that was just what happened, targets people that they think are supporting a genocide. That's still a crime, and nobody should justify that. But you could understand why somebody might rationally drive that, be driven to that situation. Fellow IRGC outlet Fars News described the incident as a murky story, questioning the plausibility of a lone or independent attack. The outlet wrote, "It's not normal for individuals to open fire on hundreds of people in a public celebration, framing the shooting as a product of, quote, widespread anti-Zionist sentiment and invoking the October 7th attack on Israel." It says the primary suspect in the attack on Jews in Australia is the Zionist regime. So people outright saying that they think this was a Zionist manufactured event, presenting the violence as a false flag operation allegedly designed to serve Israeli interests. It says Nagdi framed the shooting as a strategic move to suppress pro-Gaza activism in Australia, claiming Sydney has become one of the most prominent centers of anti-Zionist demonstrations in the West, which seems to be why they're so over-focused on why there's such an anti-Semitism problem. Same thing they tried to do in this country. They're still trying. It was not about anti-Semitism. We could prove to you that it was not anti-Semitism. Their numbers came out, and there was the vast majority were Palestinian flags and pro-Palestine protests, and most of them put on by Jewish organizations. It says he questioned whether the attack would, quote, facilitate anti-Zionist protests by the people of Sydney or open the hand of the Australian police to suppress them. But, same point. It says outlets often labeled as moderate echoed similar themes in their reporting. Tabnak portrayed the shooting as a false flag meant to revive Israel's anti-Semitism narrative. So just interesting, different perspective. Now here's the guy who saved everybody. So you can just see him run up from the car. So the guy's shooting, different spot, different guy, it looks like the other one. And just runs up on him and takes him down. That takes some courage. So he just runs away. And then he sets the gun down, which is smart. I mean, the guy's just standing there, guys. I mean, what's going on? How does this make sense to anybody? How could this happen for so long and there's not a single authority to be shown in a very highly policed area? Does anybody? There's the other guy right there, right up there. Anybody? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. Again, it doesn't mean it's not that what happened. It just there's an anomaly. Is the point? That's always worth pointing out. And I tend to agree with the general point. I mean, obviously this stuff happens, but how often when you see these events, does it turn out to be something other than just a random person? There's always more to the story. I just don't find it that, that this kind of thing just happens for no reason. Plenty of people disagree with that. I just think there's more to these things. Now, open source intel shows a longer point here. About 10 minutes of it has the whole thing. And this will be worth saving because there's much more going on. There's more. I mean, this is interesting overlap too. This is the one from there's the one up on the bridge from the other angle. It just shows you the rest of the angle from this side. Let's watch right there. So finally, there. Fuck yeah! And that's where he was shot. Now, interestingly, it says full 10 minutes of the terror attack. It says, tell me what observations you've observed. Let me just do this real quick for you. What I find interesting is that the actual tweet doesn't show up. Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. So check this out. Israel Exposed points out something interesting. And it does matter, despite what they were claiming about how that's not how Google searches or Google Trends works. The Bondi Beach shooter was Googled in Tel Aviv on December 13th, one day before the actual shooting. Why? Look, and you can look it up for yourself. Now, that is a good question. Now, yes, it's not exact, but it is an overlap that does make us, it does matter, guys. And it's not like the way they try to make it sound is it somehow it's more broad than it is to make it, it's hard. How would you say it? Google Trends is tied to a certain time frame. And what they tried to say is it's more spread out. It's not as exact. Well, that's fair, but this does make a difference. And it happens a lot these days. So what I was trying to show you, though, is that if you look at this and go back, why does it say the post is unavailable? Because this is Twitter and it's in its shutdown mode. We know when things are weird, like things fly through this platform too fast for them to grab everything. So I think there's like algorithmic walls where things are just kind of like blocked about certain topics. That's my opinion, but doesn't this happen every time? Now the post, like if I'll refresh it, it doesn't come up. It's just gone. But if I go back, it's there. See? But so the point is, if you don't get this first, if someone sends you this tweet, you won't be able to see that post. There's no way to find it. I just think that's by design, very much so. Now, Saya points out, Chabad for Israel, fundraising for IDF disguised as a Hanukkah celebration is what it turns out that it was, which then makes it about funding a genocide, does it not? Hanukkah by the Sea, Chabad for Israel, Synagogue Sydney. All right, this is what we're talking about, guys. So this is overlapped with something that is, think of it like this. Think about like this is an event, even on the same day, that was out there, we're celebrating the, Palestine. I mean, something that would insult Israelis? Then people would react. In this case, you have people that are literally watching their families get executed, raped, and tortured, and they come out and have an event to fundraise for that event, for the genocide. You don't think that's going to drive people to action? Again, and please understand, I am not rationalizing or justifying murder or violence. You know I don't believe that. I'm always saying I'm not calling for violence. It's not the case. I don't believe that. But it is also relevant to make sure we're clear that we understand the logic of why that person did that. And again, to be even more clear, maybe there is no logic. Maybe the guy was just insane, or the guys. But all of those are possibilities. Attended by IDF, settler leaders, and staunch Zionist influencers. This is one of the people that was there. That's the rabbi. So the point is that this is very much so something that people would take offense to. So you could choose to make this about Jewish people and anti-Semitism, or you could recognize that there's a lot more going on here, but that's not usually what happens. BM says, just for context, the attack on Bondi Beach happened during a local Chabad event. Chabad is a racist, genocidal organization working as a literal foreign agent of Israel, like most others, all around the world. The organization should not be allowed to operate anywhere. And then he goes on to give you some background events. And here, said, can you imagine, this is the guy from the rabbi in the West Bank saying, was this in the hands of the air? I mean, I don't want to get into it all. It's just, these people, it's so hard to continue to cover this story and not have this be so obvious, and so many of these people who are screaming about kill them all, Amalek, and then have to pretend like it's not just the most obvious thing in the world. These people are literally, cheering about killing everybody in Gaza. It just makes me sick. But this is what we're talking about. So that overlapping event seems relevant, doesn't it? Now, as this continues to develop and more information comes out, then we will, if it's relevant, we'll continue to cover it. But as of right now, what I can already see is that this is something that's being, again, even if it turns out to be exactly what they claim, the point is they didn't know that when they first yelled the narrative, because it was always about setting that tone, whether or not that was the fact. And that's dishonest, no matter what happens at the end. And that happens almost every time these days, guys. And yes, we can prove to you the amount of infiltration, the Israeli intelligence, the fake companies, the supply chain manipulation, on and on and on. Possible psychological warfare and pager attacks. That matters. And that's happening all around the world, in Australia, in more than most, guys. And, and Ortrovsky just happens to be there right before this happens. Well, let's overlap this with what's happening in our country. And I really hope you can see the connection and understand that what this government is doing, and I'm not even trying to make it about her name. What this government is doing right now is not for Americans. It's not America first, and it's absolutely at our expense. And I would argue very much so for, it's not just Zionism, but very much for this larger agenda that is very much a part of. Leaked Pam Bondi memo, which I've briefly pointed to before the last couple of days, targets, quote, anyone who isn't a Trump supporter. A leaked memo by U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi directs the Justice Department and FBI to compile a list of groups that may be labeled domestic terrorism organizations based on political views related to immigration, gender, and U.S. policy. The memo was obtained by independent investigative journalist Ken Klippenstein, who joins this who spoke to them and discussed how it expands on President Trump's National Security Policy Memorandum 7 directive following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who they still continue to use despite pretty much most now begin to see that there's more to that story, which ordered a national security strategy, to investigate and disrupt groups and administration claims that could incite political violence. But they're using him, right? And now you can see very much so in the opposite of what he was actually understanding in his final days, as well as the fact they censor people using him, despite him saying explicitly the opposite. And again, there's a good example of the first point. Bondi coming out and saying we're going to censor hate speech for Charlie Kirk. Nobody believed. People who watch Charlie Kirk they don't agree with that. Clearly, people who pretend they care about Constitution don't agree with that. So basically, everybody was like, "What? That's maybe some of the people on the left or people that believe hate speech should be censored or whatever else." But there's a large portion of the left that believes in free speech, despite what people want to say back and forth. The point is that largely on the right, to make the point clear, that should have been the most obvious, glaring, that's crazy, she's lying, she's not on our side kind of moment. But the team lied. And they just act like it's okay because left want to kill us and Antifa's the bad guy. That's what they did. And Antifa is part of the larger manipulation, but it's not what they're trying to make it out to be, to go after you because you said Israel was killing people. Now, it says Bondi's effort targets not just the left. This is important, just like always, guys, but anyone who isn't a Trump supporter, says Klippenstein, of the sweeping order, which identifies targets as entities expressing, quote, opposition to law and immigration, or extreme support for mass migration and open borders. So it's every single side. If you're out there going to deport everybody, you're on the list. If you're out there going, we don't agree with the law, you're on the list. You're not allowed to have opinions today. You're not allowed to disagree with the government. It goes on to talk about anti-Christian, anti-capitalist. I mean, you can't have opinions these days if the government doesn't agree. But let's all pretend like that's a free country, okay? People who report extremists will be financially rewarded. We are like, what's the right word? I would say drifting, but it's faster. We're sprinting in the direction of a dystopian state. We're already there, guys. It's just not being acknowledged. You guys literally have military marching through the streets. They're deporting Americans. In some cases, they're illegally deporting people who are legally here. They are like rolling out national surveillance databases using companies who are private with Israeli influence. They are committing a genocide. And what else do we need to see at this point? That's just brushing the top. So here's the actual memorandum. I downloaded on the server. Office of the Attorney General. You can read it for yourself. December 4th. You can read all the bullet points. I included this just because it had the bullet points here. This one I showed you recently. Now, I pointed this before recently, but it's important to read this again. This is 2021, written by Whitney Webb for The Last American Vagabond. Who is a terrorist in Biden's America? Now, I went through this almost entirely in a recent show. The point is that you can replace the word Biden with Trump, and it's identical to what's happening right now. I mean, nearly, maybe save for 2 points, the exact same thing. Anti-capitalist, it's the same thing. And it really, at the end of the day, moving away the terms, it amounts to exactly the same thing. That's, again, one of the many points showing you this is just all the same thing with different flavors. So people fall for it. And so they can corral both sides back and forth, like using the other side to cause you to hate, like, the left is so bad, we have to do this. The right is so evil, we have to do that. And it goes back and forth, and they collect around you. Always getting you to do what you don't want to do, getting you to accept or call for what shouldn't happen in the first place because the other side's so bad. Well, talking about the Antifa overlap, you're going to hear, this is a couple of clips that you need to see from Noam in Congress, which, again, it's like, that's why I start with that point. There's so many of these. Just in your face stupidity and dishonesty. Like her claiming, clearly showing you she does not even know what habeas corpus means. Or we'll get to the second with Trump with his MS-13 clip, like basic, embarrassing. I mean, at this point, I think just incorrect. Like she didn't know what it meant. Trump was wrong about it and didn't know that. And that seems to stand to reason that somebody else is the one driving these things, guys. Could be Stephen Miller, could be Netanyahu for all we know. And we'll go over that in a second too. This is the show we did on the 10th of October, the Gaslit Antifa Roundtable. Also, by the way, the illusion of the Comey James indictments, which, by the way, was before they were dismissed. I told you that's what we saw because the data wasn't there, and then dismissed it, and then they didn't talk about it anymore. But apparently, we're still fighting the deep state, World War III, according to Jones and everybody else. But yeah, I'll wait to get there. It's funny. I said that. It made me think of it. I'll say just Jones basically is out here talking about World War III. We're about to get to World War III. But didn't he say that because Trump was elected that we stopped World War III? But now we're in World War III because Trump, it doesn't make sense. But, it's always about, if it's Tim Pool, it's Civil War. If it's Alex Jones, it's World War III. If it's, who was the other one? Loomer, 9/11, 9/11. They do the same thing over and over. This is about Antifa. Now, my stance on the left-right paradigm. All these people in government are not to be trusted. Every single one of them, in my opinion, are compromised in one way or another. At least that's how I look at it. I could be wrong. The point is we should never, ever take any of what they say at face value. We should question everything they do, especially if you believe in them. That's just logic because they could be misled. They could be wrong and they could think they're doing the right thing. It's about you being critical. The point, though, is that this coming from a left politician doesn't mean you should ignore it. That's stupidity. Obviously, he has an agenda. They all do. That should be self-evident. But take the information as it were. So when this guy is saying, so you said Antifa is a terrorist organization, right? Where are they? How many members do they have? Where are they based out of? Like basic things that you would absolutely need to be able to designate a terrorist organization. You can't have a nebulous, flimsy idea and say terrorist organization by the actual legal reality. Like you could say whatever you want, but designation through the State Department has to have those things. And so as he goes, basically, my joke about this before was like, why couldn't he have just made up a story? They all lie. Every one of them are lying in flimsy ways that you can see through. This guy just doesn't know what to say. Watch, it's kind of baffling. Hold on. He's basically, I get the sense that he doesn't want to lie. You'll see what I mean. He just doesn't have an answer. And the guy's not really being a bully, like as much as they, could be. He's just going, I'm just asking a basic question. And he simply can't answer it. Where were we here? Sorry, hold on. I can't find it. Hold on, son of a gun. There it is.
Executive Board of Domestic Terrorist Organization, Antifa. That's our primary concern right now.
All right, that's what President Trump did. What does the FBI say?
We share the same view. When you look at the data right now, you look at the domestic terrorist threat that we're facing. Right now, what I see from my position is that's the most immediate violent threat that we're facing on the domestic side.
Remember, it's exactly what we got from Biden. And Amy, what was her name? I'm forgetting it now. The blonde one we played recently. It's not like a threat, threat building. We just don't know how to stop it. The same exact point. Domestic terrorism, the right with red hats, they're terrorists. We don't know what to do. They're all following the law, so we can't do anything. So the point was we have to remove the rights that keep them safe because we know they're wink, wink, planning terrorist acts. Literally what they were claiming. And it's the same kind of idea here. And he's just simply going this nebulous thing about Antifa. It's the same exact agenda, but aiming at the left. And you could make cases for both sides about real extremism, guys. It's not about nothing. It's about how they use the broad lie to go after not Antifa, to go after you.
From my position is that's the most immediate violent threat that we're facing on the domestic side.
So where is Antifa headquartered?
What we're doing right now with the organization.
Where in the United States does Antifa exist? Yeah. If it's a terrorist organization and you've identified it as number one.
Now, seriously, guys, just remove the political side. That's the most basic question in the world. And the reason he's asking it is because he knows they don't have an answer. But he could have lied like Noam and Bondi do, like they're breathing, but he just doesn't answer. But I just want you to think about the question. Look, he made it even more. Where are they? It's number one, not just an organization, but the number one terrorist organization, despite them always focusing on trying to Wagner and MS-13 at the moment. Now they're switching. It's always whatever they need to say. The team doesn't even acknowledge how flimsy that is. Where are they based? If they're number one in the world or in the country, where are they based? Where's their headquarters? Where do they exist in this country?
And you've identified it as number one.
We are building out the infrastructure right now.
So what does that mean? We're trying to get the information. You say Antifa is a terrorist organization. Tell us as a committee, how did you come to that?
Right.
Where do they exist? How many members do they have in the United States as of right now?
That's basic.
Well, that's very fluid. It's ongoing for us to understand that. The same, no different than Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
No, I don't want you. I'll ask one question, sir. I just want you to.
And by the way, that's not true. If you ask them, they have all kinds of numbers about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, probably made up, but they do. You can look. So it's insane to me that they can't manufacture some kind of, again, I get the sense that he didn't want to lie because they don't have something. But so how can you claim it's the number one organization if you can't even identify how many members they have? If you can't even identify where they're located? It shows you it's about an idea. And that is the crux of the point, guys, because you can't fight. It's like the war on terror. What did that do? It caused terror in the world. It actually, even by their own estimates, increased the terrorism numbers in the world. Well, because you understand, if you look, that it was actually them conducting terrorism for other reasons, and that's not a secret, working with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the same conversation. But just think about how ridiculous this is. The point we're getting to is it's aimed at you. America first, but we're going after you. And you think they're aiming at the left, so we don't recognize, but it's not. It's about Americans. And we're going to get into this even more. But it very much connects with who I think is actually driving the bus in this country.
Tell us. If you said
the same, no different than Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
No, I don't want you. I'll ask one question, sir. I just want you to tell us. If you said Antifa is the number one domestic terrorist organization operating in the United States, I just need to know where they are, how many people. I don't want a name. I don't want anything like that. Just how many people have you identified with the FBI that Antifa is made of?
Okay, that's a really point. He changed it again, which is important. He made it even more easy to answer. How many people have you identified as being a part of this number one U.S. terror organization? This is how he answers.
Well, the investigations are active.
That means zero.
So you wouldn't come to this committee and say something you can't prove. I know you wouldn't do that. But you did.
You know what I think, guys? I think this is somebody like a Donald Trump, which seems to be the one, just do it or you're out. And some people choose to go, well, screw that, I'm out. Like we saw with the case of Comey, with the first person, they said, go after him. And this is a guy that Trump appointed, a Republican. And he said, there's nothing there. There's no evidence. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to hurt my career. And so he stepped aside. Then Abba's, I'll do it. And then she steps aside, or rather gets removed. I mean, this is just one hilarious ridiculousness after another. And the guy stands there and makes it very clear that there's nothing to back up what they're using to literally bring this country down. Now, I mean, it's not just the one part of Antifa, but it's that what they're doing through that is one part of a major operation that we're all watching take place right now. That's how I see it. I mean, it just really does blow me away. Now, Donald Trump, focusing on domestic terrorism and you in this country, let's not forget how many times he's made this case. It's not like we can act like, well, that's, maybe that's what's happened, but he wouldn't do that, right? It's Antifa. He wouldn't go after Americans. Well, guess what? He said that 6 times. I couldn't find the other 2. He's put 6 times on record. Trump has openly said that we want to deport even Americans who break the law. Not naturalized, but born in this country. I call them homegrown, he says. He was all about it. Again, from the first point, how can we hear that and not go, what? Does he not understand the Constitution? Does not care about the Constitution? Is somebody else telling him to deport Americans who say bad things about Israel? Yes. Guys, how do we not be real about these conversations? Trump deports, this is just a couple of overlapping articles to include. Trump deportations revealed to be full of innocent people. That was April 1st, 2025. That was the El Salvador overlap. This was easily proven. It was covered heavily, but you got so much nonsense from the partisan side that it was hard to see often. The point was that the majority of them, I think it was 70-something%, were innocent. Most of those people here legally. And this is what we're going to get into in a second too. People who were going through the process of trying to apply for citizenship. So they weren't here illegally, who were then called illegal. Legal, L-E-G-A-L, immigrants with no criminal record. That's the majority. We also talked about how DHS lies about detaining and deporting U.S. citizens. We'll get to that in a second too. Cristian getting caught in live. Apparently, she has been wildly embarrassed over the last couple of days in front of Congress. There was a report about Trump possibly letting her go. Who's to see what's going to happen next? He'll probably call it fake news. But let's watch this clip just to remind you how kind of just frivolous and just casually discussing deporting Americans, which is illegal. It's unconstitutional.
That you're open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S. citizens, fully naturalized Americans?
If they're criminals and if they...
Now, this one, you could argue he just meant naturalized. But I mean, listen to what he says. The next ones, it's very clear. He says, born here.
Hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old. And if they rape 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn, yeah, that includes them. What, do you think there's a special category of person?
You said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Arrival guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others.
Could we use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals?
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
Real quickly about the Antifa point, let's not forget what that was about. Those were American citizens. That was the Antifa conversation. That was where of the Tesla fire. Those were Americans. So that was clear. This one's even more clear.
Our own violent criminals?
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
The ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that. Fortunately, I'd like to say, a little controversial, but I couldn't care less. We have a lot of bad criminals that came into this country, and they came in stupidly. It was an unforced error. It was an incompetent president that allowed it to happen. It was an auto pen maybe that allowed it to happen, and it did happen. But we also have a lot of bad people that have been here for a long time, people that whack people over the head with a baseball bat from behind when they're not looking and kill them, people that knife you when you're walking down the street. They're not new to our country. They're old to our country. Many of them were born in our country.
Yep, that quick. Many of them are born in our country, meaning you're an American citizen. No different than naturalization in most every possible way, save for like 2 circumstances. And none of them are used by them, by the way. But they're just claiming they're not American because they did a bad thing. You can't do that, guys.
I think we ought to get them the hell out of here, too. You want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job that we'll work on together.
In some respects, it's just as bad now, the authoritarianism that is coming, Gerald. I am really, really fearful for the President of the United States of America to suggest, as he did on Air Force One on Sunday night, that American citizens could be deported. For his press secretary to say, we're looking into a way to see if this is legal. We don't know if it's legal or not. A, is terrifying. B, betrays such a profound ignorance of first principles to which he is sworn. He is sworn to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution.
Ignorance.
And to enforce federal law.
You mentioned that you're open to deporting.
And if they that is anybody that comes in. We have bad ones too.
Profoundly un-American, utterly unconstitutional, and I'm sorry to say, is coming.
A chilling argument from Judge Knapp, right? Now, here is one of the ones that I haven't talked about. I tend to point back to him saying that, but let's not forget, guys, that there was an amendment put forward about stopping deportation of U.S. citizens that was voted down by the Republicans. And it wasn't just, it's understand our government, guys, is constantly going in the same direction. But think about how insane that is. That's like Gabbard's Stop Arming Terrorists Act that they literally voted no to. And we don't act like we know what's going on. Not a joke, by the way. It was very clear. It was very simple. And they voted no because they fund terrorism, in case you missed that. Now, here is the point about deporting U.S. citizens, or rather specifically in this case, U.S. veterans. Now, this is across the board. I mean, this is one of the most clear parts of this conversation. We talked, what was it, Reyes? We just talked about him, and he's even gotten more coverage in corporate media lately. They held him for days. He was a U.S. citizen. He was a veteran. Just because they didn't like that he made them feel stupid. They thought he was an immigrant. They arrested him. He had an ID. They didn't listen to him. They brought him in, and they finally proved he was an American citizen. They kept him for a few days. They wouldn't feed him. He wouldn't. I mean, these people are broken. I mean, there's examples of, there was an example I can't even talk about all these, of an ICE agent who was caught driving the car of a deportation. They deported the guy, and then the guy just stole the person's car that wasn't even his, and the family catch up to him because there's a GPS tracker, and they're like, "That's our car." Like, prove it. Like, it was ridiculous. These are bounty hunter types that have been barely worked in. There's no accountability. They're not identifying themselves. They aren't showing who their names are. They're not producing warrants, and they just lie about it all. And every one of those points has been proven more than almost anything I've ever covered. I've shown you the examples over and over. Judges have said, yes, you are. They just don't care. And Noam is drowning in this right now. I guess because she thought that Trump supporting her would, I guess, not let this happen. I don't know. But you're going to like this clip. I said this is important because it outlines what many have been saying, myself included, about who they are illegally targeting. And it shows that she knows that they're doing that. And I say deporting people as illegals who are going through the legal process exactly as demanded by the government is a crime. And that's what they're doing.
Then with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country, correct?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Your question was?
Immigrants with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country.
There are individuals in this country that have applications that...
And they are legally here because it's a lawful pathway, right?
It's a lawful pathway.
Okay, so if your department then deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application...
Which they've done tons of.
You are violating the law, correct?
Joe Biden left us with...
I'm not asking about Joe Biden. I'm asking you a specific question.
It doesn't even matter, right? So her argument is, if you want to break it down, that Joe Biden let all these bad people in, therefore we can violate the Constitution. That's what she's doing. Simple. Or if you want to make it break the law, but it's both. I mean, that's not an argument. That's like saying that Joe Biden did this and we can't give them all due process. It'll take too much time. Well, then admit that you don't believe in the Constitution. The time is not an issue. Even if it is too long, the time is not relevant. It's about the principle that shall not be infringed. And you all recognize that when it's things that you like. See, that's not principled. If you were a principled person, you would be able to acknowledge the reality of it, whether or not you agree with the political drive. At this point in time, we can prove this has happened over and over and over. They've scooped up people who were showing up to their appointments, who were literally going through the process. And in many cases, just because they were there, in some cases, because they have like a traffic ticket from 5 years ago. And that's not a joke. And these people are getting sent some places to, like, in sometimes countries where they're locked up. They're not even criminals. And so he's just making it clear. And I don't trust this guy. He's another politician. But the point is the same. They are doing this, and that is a crime. And her answer is, Biden let bad guys in. Okay, fine. Then Biden's a criminal too. But you are as well, Noam. Are we on the same page?
If your department deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Is that correct?
It was greatly violated when they allowed
I'm asking you.
people to come
I'm
in
asking
and
you.
granted asylum applications.
Why are you filibustering? Why can't you answer the question? It's a simple question.
Your president,
if your department
and your secretary
deports
did not follow
anyone
the law.
with an...
Isn't that's just desperate, guys? And clearly somebody's been telling her just to bully over the top. It's not going to work. Right? The only people who are going to cheer that are the blind followers who would cheer you no matter what you did up there. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's not an answer. Again, then you're both criminals. That's what I think anyway.
Ongoing asylum application, You are violating the law. Isn't that correct?
The asylum program was broken under the last.
Mr. Chairman, I will reclaim my time. She's not answering the question.
Now, look, that's not an invalid point if you believe that, right? Okay, so the system, the process was completely broken. Okay, then stop that and fix the system. You don't then retroactively just illegally remove people who are in that process. You acknowledge the fact that there was an agreement made, and you that's what an honorable, principled person would do, especially since these are not criminals, guys. If you really look, you'll see that the vast majority are just average people. In many cases, like we're going to get into next, veterans. Actually, this is the wrong one. The next one's about the veteran. This is we'll get into it in a second.
But the chairman, I will reclaim my time. She's not answering the question. But the obvious answer is that yes, if you follow a lawful pathway, asylum is a lawful pathway. If you have an open asylum case, you are here lawfully. Mm-hmm. But the problem that we are seeing around the country is that you are not following the law. Don't tell us to change the law. If you don't like the asylum system, you change the asylum law. Bring it to us. We'll work with you. I think it needs to be changed. But you can't just decide that you're not going to follow the law. And
just to make the point, he should hear his own advice because they all do the same damn thing. And this is what's so confounding for the partisan game, that people like us can see that they're all doing the same thing. And there's no way to pit us against ourselves and make it look like we're on one side versus the other. Like I've said this for so long. David Icke makes the same point. If you look over the years, you'll watch one day I'm the left snowflake, next day I'm the right wing man. If during COVID, I was the right wing crazy. Now I'm the left wing maniac. And no, I'm just I'm doing the same consistent coverage, and both sides don't like that. So don't think we're siding with the Democrat here or the Republican. The point is our government lies to us. But in this moment, the reality is she is breaking the law, regardless of whether you think he's using that to his benefit.
You can't just decide that you're not going to follow the law, and asylum is a law, and deport people who have ongoing applications.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it really is, guys. And that's just one of a couple of clips, but the whole thing. Back in the days when I used to go through these, I could do 2 shows about the kind of nonsense that she was dealing with. And it's all her own doing. Now here is, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'll try to jump to it, but this is the clip. I'll just let it speak for itself. It's wild because I can prove to you, like I already did in the previous show, that they've deported a bunch of U.S. veterans.
Madam Secretary, how many United States military veterans have you deported?
Sir, we have not deported U.S. citizens or military veterans.
Both of those are lies. Easily proven. And she knows that.
I don't believe you served in the military. I haven't either. But I think you and I can agree that as Americans, we owe everything to those who have served our country in uniform, particularly those who have served in combat. Do you agree with that?
Sir, I believe that people that are in this United States that are citizens have legal status here.
Madam Secretary.
What a gross answer even right there, right? So now you're saying that people who are, let's say have a green card because there is overlaps in the military, that therefore that they're not she basically just said that those people don't count or that they're not good enough. These are people that literally risk their lives for this country. Now, my opinions about what the government, the military is actually doing. But as I've always said, people who do not know that and join because they believe with the lies they're told, it's still an honorable thing. It's still worthy of praise and courage to go out and risk your life for what you thought was an honorable cause. So that person, so this person's a veteran who was deported. And that's how she regards them.
We are joined on Zoom by a gentleman named Sejun Park. He is a United States Army combat veteran who was shot twice while serving our country in Panama in 1989. Like many veterans, he struggled with PTSD and substance abuse after his service. He was arrested in the 1990s for some minor drug offenses, nothing serious. He never hurt anyone besides himself, and he's been clean and sober for 14 years.
Like tons of veterans.
He is a combat veteran, a Purple Heart recipient. He has sacrificed more for this country than most people ever have. Earlier this year, you deported him to Korea, a country he hasn't lived in since he was 7 years old. Will you join me in thanking Mr. Park for his service to our country?
Sir, I'm grateful.
Before she even answers, the way he set that up, this is why it's so hard. It rubs you the wrong way. It's a gotcha political moment. You didn't have to thank him for your service. you're just trying to set her up, but it works because she's just too, I don't know what the right word is. She's too ridiculous to just do that. Why would you just do that? Thank you for your service. Because she knows what she did. She knows what they're involved in. So she doesn't want to say that because, I guess it'll make you look even more stupid than you already do. I don't know. The logic is missing there for me, but he could have just been like, look, this is a veteran right here who's been deported. Can you explain that? Like, that would have been a better way to do that, not make it some buzz gotcha. But this is what these people do. I just want to point that out for those that are turned off by that. It doesn't change the point, though.
A country he hasn't lived in since he was 7 years old. Will you join me in thanking Mr. Park for his service to our country?
Sir, I'm grateful for every single person that has served our country and follows our laws.
Can you please?
And follows our laws. What a clown. Again, I think he makes the point. Many veterans, there's a huge percentage of them that fall into drugs because of what they make them do. I guess it's only wrong when the guy is brown or whatever, Korean. Think about what she's saying right there. She's just trying to avoid the reality that they did this to a U.S. veteran for something that happened a long time ago. That's what I was saying. The guy had a small drug charge, personally, corrected, clear his whole life, fought in the military. It's like going back and getting somebody for a traffic ticket, which has happened, who is here legally, that it's on the up and up. The point is, if they're going to do that, then why wouldn't you go after every other veteran who's white? There's no difference.
Please tell Mr. Park why you deported him.
Every one of them needs
to our country.
Sir, I'm grateful for every single person that has served our country and follows our laws.
Can you please tell Mr. Park why you deported him?
Every one of them needs to be enforced.
But you understand that many veterans struggle with PTSD, many veterans struggle with substance abuse.
Remind me, when is enforcing a drug charge to deport someone to a foreign country?
Challenges. This man took 2 bullets for our country. You have broad authority, by the way, as secretary, to issue humanitarian parole, to do deferred action. Will you commit to at least looking at Mr. Park's case to see if you can help him find a pathway back to this country that he sacrificed so much for?
I will absolutely look at his case, but I want you
to
remember that
Madam Secretary, the man behind you, please stand up, sir. His name is Jim Brown from Troy, Missouri. He is a Navy combat veteran who served our country in the Gulf War. He's married to a woman named Donna, who came to our country legally from Ireland when she was 11 years old. She has lived here for 48 years. Because of you, Jim's wife, Donna, has been in prison for the last 4 months. She did not come here illegally, and she has never committed any crime other than writing 2 bad checks totaling $80 10 years ago.
Think about that.
She is currently in prison and facing deportation.
Now, what's crazy is you may think these are the extreme cases, and they are. That's like the most ridiculous, but there's tons of them. Traffic tickets, things like that. $80 in bad checks from years ago. An Irish woman. So let's make sure we're clear that this is not even about, it largely seems to be racial, but you could be, we've already shown you, there's a white Republican Trump supporter who got his family, who got deported and got removed because there was an overlap. I forget what country he was from. That happened. There's multiple Mexican Trump supporters. Even one had a real ID who got deported. The point is the government doesn't care about any of us. I think it's about time we start being honest about that.
Ms. Noem, will you thank Mr. Brown for his service to our country?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your service to our country.
Now, what possible explanation can there be for locking up his wife for 4 months when she has committed no crime other than writing a couple of bad checks for $80?
Sir, it is not my prerogative, my latitude, or my job to pick and choose which laws in this country get enforced.
You have broad discretion as the secretary. You can issue parole. You can do all kinds of things.
Is she actually arguing that it makes sense to arrest and hold for 4 months, which is insane, and deport a woman who has lived here legally all this long for a crime that was checks from that long ago? That's not even constitutional. That's not how that works, guys. There's a law that is applied. You broke the law, there's a consequence. The idea that you jump to deportation is something they've created. These people have constitutional rights. That's the reality, guys. And if you even look at the overlap of green cards and everything else, or even naturalized U.S. citizens, there's only very extreme examples that have to do with terrorism, which is, by the way, why they're trying to fold that in. But these things don't even apply.
But you're choosing not to. Will you commit, again, to just reviewing Donna's case and reuniting this combat veteran with his beloved wife, who also loves this country?
I will review the case.
Now, Madam Secretary, you've already heard the story of Lance Corporal Alejandro Barranco, the United States Marine veteran who is behind you, who also has 2 brothers who are United States Marines. Will you thank Lance Corporal Barranco for his service?
Thank you for your service.
His father, Narcisco Barranco, is a landscaper in California who has lived peacefully in our country for 30 years and has no criminal record. Last spring, while he was mowing the lawn at an IHOP, ICE agents tackled him in the street and imprisoned him for weeks. A peaceful, hard-working man who raised 3 sons to be United States Marines. We need men of that character in this country. Again, as Secretary, you have broad discretion. Will you consider Lance Corporal Barranco's father for parole in place to stay in our country, owing to the fact that he has contributed to our country by raising 3 United States Marines?
This is an opportunity to remind everybody that every person that's in this country illegally has an opportunity to voluntarily go home and come back the right way.
He raised 3 United States
we will
Marines.
Facilitate that.
He has been living here peacefully, doing his job for 30 years. You have discretion. You are choosing not to use it. Madam Secretary, you promised America that you would go after the worst of the worst. But these people are not the worst of the worst. A Purple Heart recipient, a military spouse, the father of 3 Marines. And it's not just veterans and military families. You are locking up and deporting children with cancer, mothers with babies in the NICU, United States citizens. There are many problems with your leadership, but the biggest problem is this. You don't seem to know how to tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. Go after the bad guys. Go after the terrorists. Do not go after veterans, Marines, children,
Gentlemen's
United
time's
States
expired.
citizens. I yield back.
At the end of the day, yeah, they definitely will go after the terrorists, and they both think that's you. So, this is all back and forth. But the reality for me is, you can make a case about people who are here illegally that aren't harming anybody. But, in the case we're talking about that there is a crime that's committed, and in the case of being here illegally, then that would be deportation. That is the logical outcome to that crime. But if you're talking about somebody who's lived here legally with a green card, who wrote a bad check, no matter how bad the check, outside of terrorist level activity, there is no deportation there. That's not how that works. There is a reality of constitutional rights. But the point is that you could make the same argument he just made about American citizens like Reyes, who's a U.S. veteran, or people who literally were deported. We just talked about that, who was a U.S. citizen. It's so obvious what this is. Problem is, people are so tied into their political views that this is blocked out because, he says that, for example. Here's Kevin Sorbo, who comes out and says, fun fact, this NPR, Purple Heart Army veteran, self-deports after nearly 50 years in the United States. A veteran. So here legally, right? 50 years, works for the military. And Kevin Sorbo says, fun fact, he self-deported. Funny how they left that part out. Yeah, guess what? Funny how you left out the part about how he was threatened that he would be jailed and deported unless he left voluntarily, like Noam just said. Veteran who took bullets for the U.S. How many bullets have you taken, Kevin? Right? I've engaged with him more than once about these things. He can be blatantly wrong about something or partial story and then never follows up. People like this are blind partisan followers. It's sad. This is a problem, guys. You either care about the principle or you don't. Matt Little, this story kills me. Federal agent arrests citizen observer watching ICE. Now, this is a person who is one of these. She's watching. She's not breaking the law. These people who are breaking the law, they're not identifying themselves. They're not giving warrants. We've already talked about this. And these are people that are watching to say, well, we see what you're doing, right? They know them. They're keeping note of them. They're keeping lists. We've already proven that. And then they abuse them. Like the one that got shot because she got backed in by their car. And then he shot her 5 times, 7 holes, and then bragged about it. And then nothing happened. Even though it turned out that it was proven that she did not break the law and even didn't have a gun like they claim she did. She just had a permit, the gun was at the house. They looked her up, made the lie, and then that all went away. Even though he went online and bragged about how he got, it's disgusting. Or the family where the cops run up around them. They didn't know what was happening. They drive away and they shoot at the family in the car. Lie about how they tried to run them over. That comes out in court. That proves they lied about it. Nothing happens. They later arrest that guy anyway. These people are completely, these are like these are the SS kind of stuff, guys, like rather the Stasi or the secret police. Like we're talking about unaccountable enforcement. So in this case, another American citizen who's simply watching them, who they want to punish. ICE arrests her for seemingly no reason. What's the word they use? You're not infringing. What's the word they use? Basically like you're blocking their investigation or whatever. And she's just standing there. You can watch the video. They cut her wedding ring off. Sue Tincher, 55-year-old American citizen, a grandmother. White, in case you thought you'd be safe, he writes. She walked to her neighbor's house after getting alerts that ICE was nearby. She stood across the street and asked an officer if they were ICE. They told her to get back. She didn't move. I watched it. It's kind of a long video, but it's exactly what it says. She stands there. It's weird. Seconds later, they threw her to the ground, handcuffed her, hauled her away. She spent 5 hours in leg shackles at a federal building. Agents cut off her wedding ring and threatened to pepper spray her in the truck. Her husband spent all day trying to find where they'd taken her because nobody said anything. Federal officials wouldn't tell him. She didn't break the law, you understand. She just bugged them. She just watched them, and you're not supposed to do that. Her crime, simply standing on a public street, watching and asking questions. Read that again. Here in Minnesota, U.S. citizen, arrested, restrained, and disappeared for hours, not for interfering, not for resisting, but for asking questions. If they can arrest Sue Tincher for standing on a public sidewalk, they can arrest anyone. And guys, they've already shown us that. Now, Noam, in that same discussion, has said out loud, U.S. citizens need to carry proof of citizenship. This woman does not know what she's doing. I mean, I think it's very obvious she doesn't know what habeas corpus means. That was very embarrassing for her. And now she's literally claiming something that's not true. That's papers, please stuff, guys. That's not what we believe in. And that's not the law. In most states, you're not even required to carry a driver's license, guys. That's you can easily look it up. Now, even the ones that have forced that in, I argue that's unconstitutional. Regardless, you do not need to carry proof of citizenship, guys. That's not the law. She's drowning. Now, overlapping this, here's a White House post. CC Democrats, they're so childish. Hate, double hate, loathe entirely. I mean, it feels like a 15-year-old runs this account. They take the Grinch, like they seem to be bastardizing like every Christmas thing right now. How the illegals stole healthcare is what it's called. Crystal Ball makes a great point. Perfect representation of the Trump regime politics. Does anyone really buy that the big problem in our healthcare system, seriously, is immigrants? But of course, it's easy to scapegoat powerless people. Much harder to take on pharma, health insurance, private equity. They have no interest in doing so anyway, since this regime's first priority is billionaire class. Yep. Whether you agree with her or not, like her work or not, guys, they have sold you out. The Silicon Valley team, technocrat, I mean, everything you could possibly point to right now. I didn't even make the list. And healthcare? Seriously? Maha, how's that working out for you? But it's immigrants. That's the problem, guys. They're not even trying anymore. So it's about trying to force you in. Now, in case you didn't see it, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was released. You know why? If you actually cared to look at the facts and information and what the judge was, there is nothing there. They found he's not a terrorist. They found he's not guilty, and they let him go. Benny Johnson then comes out and says, released MS-13 terrorist Garcia wages war against the Trump administration. He says, I will continue to fight against injustices of this government. Yeah, because that's how you'd frame that, right? That I'm going to fight the injustices of the government is war against the... I mean, these people are cartoonishly stupid. Johnson is just a narrative, guys. It's whatever they need to say to paint whatever Trump wants it to look like. How do we not see that? The case in the court of law in many different places, not just the endpoint. It came out very clearly. I went through this in this show alone in the very beginning. This was April. The unprecedented gaslighting and lies around Abrego Garcia. I include all of the court documents from the very beginning. The ones from before, from the original Trump administration, where they gave him the holding of removal. They did. And then somehow recircle back and go, terrorist. Or the lies about what happened at the Home Depot point, or the lies about the cop said, about the lies about everything was built on literal lies. That came out in court. And they said there's nothing there, on top of the fact they tried to swing back in and go, he's a human trafficker. Because apparently a child came along, that was his son. And so now all of a sudden, they made this claim about trafficking. They used the distance. The judge looked at it and said, that's not only implausible, it's impossible. On top of the fact that they made it up. And the MS-13 point is based on absolutely nothing other than a cop who was fired for corruption, who made it up. And you could prove this, guys. We've gone over this extensively. So the point is very clear that he was released because there's nothing to... And look at all the other cases. Look at all the other times they've been lying to you and throwing huge cases at Khalil and Ozturk. And they went home because they were lied about. And Benny Johnson just toes the line. Benny Johnsons and Alec Jones and Nick, these people need to be called out. And Raig Nationalist says, despite having MS-13 tattooed on his hand, he actually said that. 309,000 followers. I said, you can't be serious. Do people like you really exist, or are you just being dishonest for your team? So let's watch this clip. This is what this 300,000 follower blind Trump supporter wants you to think. Did he have MS-13 tattooed on his hand, guys? Do you remember? Let's take a look. Not only do I have the conversation that's embarrassing for Trump, but I overlapped it with the imagery that shows you that that's simply not true. There's pineapple and whatever else. Now remember, guys, even those were proven by experts around these things on many political sides that none of those align with anything that tattoos in the gangs. That's easy. That's what was proven, on top of the fact that he doesn't have the letters and numbers on his hand. He doesn't. Because look, just to be clear, that is what Trump meant, and I'll show you the clip. Even he is putting it in quotes, meaning that it's actually that, not just some imagery they claim meant that, on top of the fact that that was proven to not even mean what they claimed. In case you forgot, here's the clip.
He wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute over that.
Now, to be clear, I genuinely think that Trump made a fool of himself because he thought that's what it said. They sent him this picture, which very clearly you can see that they're superimposed on top of it, which it was, by the way. I'll let it play out. Those were they put the M and the S and the 1 and the 3 over his tattoos to try to make the case for what those meant. Right? Marijuana, M, smiley face, across apparently 1, 3 for a skull. They don't mean that. None of the gang experts have said that other than the Nick Sorters and the rest that made those claims. But Trump thought those were on his knuckles. The video makes that astoundingly clear. Just to be clear, the M and the S and the 1 and the 3 are not on his hands. You can see it right here.
Of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute over that.
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshopped.
That was Photoshopped. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. But I picked you, Terry.
How embarrassing.
You're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry.
Just look, guys, it's not there. And you can confirm that with right now. Look at his hand right now. It's not there. It's just so wild how it can be so vividly obvious. Now, ask yourself why, which didn't happen. Why didn't the left-wing media go absolutely gangbusters on that point? You tell me. It's an absolutely low-hanging fruit slam dunk, but they didn't. Even he tries to avoid it in this interview. Maybe it's because they're not actually fighting against each other. I don't know.
Do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture.
And you think it was Photoshop? Well,
here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine, sir. I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted.
Here's what's crazy. He and all of his followers went on to try to argue that he didn't mean that, because they later realized how obviously wrong that was. So they tried to make it sound like the left-wing media misrepresented him again. No, he very clearly not interpreted. He was very clear about that. But like I said, first point today, this can be there and be so astoundingly clear, and yet the whole conversation that we regard as the main conversation just ignores it all and acts like it's not there. They don't represent everybody, not even close to the majority. We must see that by now.
This is why people no longer believe the news, because it's fake.
It's so stupid. Yes, that's why they no longer believe. All of you is why. God, I can't get past this.
This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there,
at the
but they're
photograph.
there now, right?
No,
but they're there
in
now.
your picture.
Terry,
So clear he thought this.
he's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
Well, we'll take a look at that.
You do
We'll take
such
a
a
look.
disservice.
We'll take a look at
Why
that,
don't you
sir.
just say, yes, he does? And
Now, it's certainly possible that Trump just thought if he really pushed it that he could make that happen. And then why would that be? Let's not forget, guys, El Salvador is very much a part of the network state overlap. El Salvador is one of these versions of what they're doing. It's not the same as Prospera, but it's very clearly one of these examples. And so there's a point in why this had to be done. There's more going on than we could possibly understand. And again, despite having it on his hand, people like this exist. And I think people actually believe that. But Benny Johnson is the reason people blindly vote MS-13 terrorist. Again, despite the court literally proving the opposite. Now, overlapping this with Venezuela, because very much was that part of the conversation, guys. Remember, that was Tren de Aragua, MS-13, Venezuela invasion. That's where all this was around. That was the time frame. Remember, they were trying to claim it was Biden and Venezuela's invading, and it was kind of all mashed together, but it was trying to argue that MS-13 and Tren de Aragua were invading the country, and Biden was part of it somehow, and it was an insurrection at the same time, Insurrection Act. It just got so muddled. But it all happened. So Venezuela, weird, hasn't stopped. It's almost like it wasn't about any of that, right? Like we all kind of see right now. And as you already saw, it's from the 10th, Trump says the U.S. has seized the oil tanker from the coast of Venezuela. And Massey rightly says, still believe it's about drugs? It never was. And see that they just don't care. They know once they just shift into the new thing, they don't look back, but they know the media, including the media that's supposed to be adversarial, will carry the larger narrative. It always does. Let's also point out that they then claim very clearly that they were going to seize the oil, like we didn't know that was going to happen. Just high seas piracy, guys. There's no way around it. And rightly so, as somebody points out. Oh, well, first of this, here, let's do this one first. I'll show you my meme. As somebody rightly points out, but when the Houthis do it, it's terrorism, right? Right. You mean the Houthis who are literally doing so because of international law and ICC and the fact that Israel's committing a genocide and has very publicly said that when these things stop, they will release or stop or give them back. And they've never killed anybody. They've always released them. Yeah, but they're the terrorists, right? But here's the U.S. seizing, stealing, and never returning. But they're the good guys. I mean, it's insulting to our intelligence. And as I said, this meme, how they want you to think pirates look. Pirates and the Houthi rebels, right? How pirates actually look. Very much so today. All of them. Now, interestingly enough, this didn't get much attention, but Iran, and this is as of the 13th, Iran, what you could argue it's in retaliation or in response, it's hard to know for sure, but Iran seizes a foreign tanker allegedly carrying smuggled diesel in Gulf of Oman. Now, what I think this relates to is about Israel or some kind of because remember, they've been trying to stop, the Houthis included, the flowing of weapons and supplies to Israel because they're committing a genocide. And so it's possible, well, this is maybe why it didn't get much attention. I'm not sure. You'd think that they might scream about this. Because at one point, this was like, this would spin out the conversation. Iran, the limpet mine, the whole thing. But Iran seized a foreign tanker on Friday, allegedly carrying 6 million liters of smuggled diesel in Gulf of Oman. Now, they argued that the oil was potentially going to Iran. So, maybe this was just a stunt meant to say, well, screw you, we're going to take it from somewhere else. I mean, look, my opinion about all governments. I don't think any of them are beyond breaking the law for their own interests. It says 18 crew members from India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh were on board. It says, quote, an oil tanker carried 6 million liters of contraband diesel fuel that has been boarded off the coast of the Sea of Oman. Now, it hasn't been demonstrated or proven that they took the oil. They've seized this because they claim it was breaking the law, but I find it just as likely they'll take the oil. And it goes on to say the vessel had disabled all of its navigation systems. Now, if that's true, and you can't take their word for it, it makes sense to what I was saying, that this is a black market overlap to what they're trying, or rather just trying to get around their control of those areas. No information was provided about the name of the vessel. It says Iran forces regularly announce the interception. Last month, Iran seized a ship flying the flag of, they've been doing this quite a bit in the Strait of Hormuz. But what's interesting is just the overlap to this. And there's only one group out there openly breaking international law and committing a genocide. And so, they're seizing what they want, and it's very openly against the law. Now, you could argue this would be against the law too, especially in this context. But I argue what's happening, and let's just take the Houthis, because I can't tell you for sure what the intention was here. What they're doing and how they followed through is very clear. It's about the genocide. And they're releasing people. They're not killing anybody. I mean, look at what's happening on the U.S. side. They're bombing people on boats, not even claiming anything. Now, on top of that, on the 12th, U.S. forces, this is an old story, but it's kind of coming out around all of this. U.S. forces raided a ship headed to Iran from China in Indian Ocean, according to the Wall Street Journal. Washington says a U.S. Special Operations team in Indian Ocean raided a ship headed to Iran from China last month. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear about this. And it says, and seized military-related articles. What were those? Military-related articles? From Iran to China? Okay, but first of all, let's recognize there's no legal reality here where they can go, we're going to seize the ship because you're Iran. No, there's no illegal reality. They have every right to trade with China. It says the cargo consisted of components potentially useful for Iran's conventional weapons. Okay, so like normal stuff that everybody uses is not even about the nuclear program. So this is just belligerent. This is piracy. It says they destroyed the shipment. I highly doubt that. I'm sure they used it. The U.S. forces boarded the ship several hundred miles off the coast of Sri Lanka. So you see, there's even an overlap here with what just happened from Iran and seizing that ship. You see, there's always something more going on behind all of it. And that's why we have to leave it there, because this seems, you're getting barely surface level here. I'm not getting many other data points on this, so I get the sense there's more going on around this, but it's kind of tit for tat. Interesting. Here is Venezuela. This is the defense minister saying the people of the United States must understand their government is an instrument of war. And once again, they intend to send young Americans back to their homes in black body bags and coffins. Now, do they have an interest in lying about their adversary? Of course they do. They all do. But I can tell you as an American who has studied the U.S. government that he's absolutely correct. It is what's happening. I mean, it's just we need to come to terms. And you could argue that it's because of outside forces. I do think that's what's happening, but I think you can prove it's been going on a lot longer than that. But we need to be real about what we're doing, what we can see them doing, working with ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, bombing Sudan, Somalia, just nonstop warmongering, and already now going after Venezuela on the ground. Putin backs Maduro amid standoff with the United States. So it's only getting more and more intense in regard to what's going to happen. And President Trump says land strikes in Venezuela are starting. He's told you. This is nothing to do with peace. He's not the peace president. What about no new wars and all this? You can't keep pretending this is not another violation of what was promised.
But 96% of the drugs coming in by water, every one of those boats you see get shot down, you just saved 25,000 Americans.
It's such a lie, guys. And this is first point. That's why I did it today. Everyone knows that's not true. Glenn Greenwald pointed out there are 70,000 overdoses a year. Okay. If I remember correctly, whatever, it's just the number that they're continuing to use is, if you add it up, it's ridiculous. It's just based in nothing. It's not true. And on top of that, the idea that you somehow know that the boats were going to the United States, which you could prove many of them weren't. On top of that, that if they did, that therefore that would amount to immediately 25 or at some point 25,000. It's just not true. On top of the fact of all of it, that fentanyl in no way, which is what they're pointing to right there, is coming from Venezuela. All of these are basic proven lies. As easy as 1 + 1 at this point, and they just keep saying them.
American lives, but we knocked out 96% of the drugs coming in by water, and now we're starting by land, and by land is a lot easier, and that's going to start happening.
It's just such a lazy manufactured event. Clearly, you wanted to go after Venezuela, clearly, and this is just what you just cobble through this and act like you changed something. Guys, our government has been involved with drug trafficking for as long as I've done this. I've just showed you the DEA post about being involved with the cartels and laundering drugs. I'll show it to you when we're done.
Happening, and we're not going to have people destroying our youth, destroying our families.
Yeah, you mean genocide support or dioxins or COVID-19 shots or, any number of all the things you're doing to us all the time. Well, here is Forbes. The wiretap. The DEA laundered $19 million of cartel drug money into cash and crypto. August 2025. Right, but it's them over there. Even though the moment we start doing the other thing we want on Venezuela's territory, suddenly the drug thing will stop and we won't talk about it anymore. Mark my words. It happened before. And as Kim Iverson rightly says, regime change president just like the rest. But is anybody even remotely surprised by that? It's nothing. The narrative is one thing. His actions have always been the same. Thomas Massey says, recently the president announced land strikes against Venezuela. No U.S. president is authorized to commit acts of war in a sovereign country without authorization from Congress. But yes, I mean, it's, you know why this is frustrating? Because it has been the same since World War II. And I agree with him. It's absolutely correct. But these are these moments where it just becomes so, they do it so often that it just kind of loses its meaning. And this is part of what they're doing to, diminish the validity of the Constitution for obvious reasons. The last few things that they have to pretend they're following. In this case, guys, it is a crime. But so too were all the rest of them, from Biden and from Bush and Obama. I mean, yes. So arrest them all, as far as I'm concerned, 100%. But what he's doing is a crime. He says, I co-sponsored the War Powers Resolution to force Congress to vote for or against this action. But they don't care. And just don't forget, Machado, who is the one who they want in power in Venezuela, is a absolute diehard Israel supporter who wrote a letter to Netanyahu calling for him to regime change the country. I showed you the letter live on the show the last time we talked about it. And she says, accuses Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah and Hamas of invading Venezuela. What? That's not a joke, by the way. She says this while the U.S. is invading Venezuela. Quote, openly, freely, in accordance with the regime. Oh, I see. So they have allies. Okay. And so what's happening is the U.S. government's invading, and you and Israel want that, and so it's all freedom and the rest is bad guy stuff. It's all they know, guys. Overlapping this with Syria, which I see as a larger part of a similar conversation, there was an interesting event that took place. And it's very important to understand how this is exposing their hand as much as they're trying to lie about it. Interesting timing with what we talked about in the other situations. Now, as Dave DeCamp rightly points out, Trump came out and spoke about this, addresses the ISIS attack on U.S. forces in Syria. He says, we mourn the loss of 3 great patriots in Syria. Dave makes it very clear. The 3 Americans would still be alive if Trump actually pulled out of Syria. Now, I posted this earlier and simply said, told you. And by the way, it's the same thing I said about Afghanistan. Wait for that event to happen down the line. So, see, I told you they were there. It's so obvious. They're not really leaving these places. Now, that's not a full deployment. And it very well could just be mercenary types like Academy Blackwater stuff, but it is still U.S. presence. But I argue they're troops, just like we see here. We knew they were in Syria, though, but the argument was not supposed to be that there was real deployment. And Trump claimed he pulled out of Syria. Trump claimed he defeated ISIS 100% more than once. I always make fun of that because that's what he said. How dumb is that? He said, you could say he defeated them and then argue that there's remnants, but he said 100% over and over and then bombed them. It's just so stupid. But they stayed. And that's why what's happening here, ultimately, that there's people on the ground while they're allowing ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Israeli Zionist extremists to do whatever they want, rape, torture, and murder, which is what's happening. Murdering Alawites, Druze, Christians around the area. We've covered all this, and I'll show you an article. We talk about it. Here's Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com. Gunman who killed 3 Americans in Syria was member of Syrian government security forces, which, of course, shockingly, is what Trump's not talking about. The gunman who killed 2 members of the Iowa National Guard and an American civilian interpreter in an attack on Palmyra, central Syria. Oh, by the way, I've got an interview with Vanessa Beeley coming up on the 20th. It's been a while since we talked, and I've reached out, and this happened since then. So it'll be a good time to catch up with her about the bigger picture. One of the best independent journalists out there. On Saturday, it says, after the killing of them on Saturday, was a member of the Syrian government security forces. That's the person who carried out the attack, according to Syrian Interior Ministry. So Syrian government, meaning now, not before. So that means the groups that they're supporting, that means Julani, that means ISIS, Al-Qaeda terrorists. Now, you could argue it's not to a man that there's mixed situation here, but it's not debatable. These people, which, by the way, let me just grab this. Let's do this. I want to show you his picture from before. I'm sure it'll pop up. Come on. Here. Or well, certainly should. Maybe that's an indication that, there we go. Okay. So here, this is not a joke. For some people, that I guess it's now drifting in the background. As they were invading and taking over Syria for Israel alongside Zionists in Israel, He was on the U.S. terrorist watch list with a $10 million bounty. That's Jelani right there. Here he is today. Or go back to this. The top one. Next to Trump in many pictures, glad-handing with all of the Western allies. Right? So this is not a secret. He was Hayat al-Sham. That's an al-Qaeda offshoot. They're part of the same conversation. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights first reported that the attacker was a member of the security forces and called for the Syrian government, this is interesting, which is led by Hayat al-Sham, that's al-Qaeda, to get rid of members who have ISIS ideology. Oh, this gets really interesting. So apparently, now look, I don't trust the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. I've talked about it in the past. It's a very manipulated platform. But I very much respect Dave's reporting as well as this research. So, but as always, question everything. So the fact that they claim that the shooter was part of what it seems to be the old part of the government, or rather really just not in line with the ISIS al-Qaeda side of it, and says that he was angry or was pushing them to get rid of people with ISIS ideology. This is the guy that they're claiming is an ISIS shooter, right? So the Syrian Interior Ministry claimed after this, or rather before the attack, that Syrian authorities had, quote, decided to fire him because he had extremist Islamist ideology. Okay, so he is accusing the Syrian, or rather, not accusing, he is petitioning the Syrian government to get rid of people who had ISIS ideology. Then they go, you're fired because you have extremist ideology. Interesting. And it says, and they had planned to get rid of him, but he hadn't gotten officially fired when they did that. And it says, quote, we discovered him in December, I guess meaning he's extremist, and we were going to dismiss him. But we didn't make it in time because it was a holiday. So we let the terrorists sit by until after Christmas. Yeah, that doesn't really ring true for me. I'm just going to be honest. And it goes on to say, according to Wael Izam, a Palestinian journalist who has covered the conflict in Syria for many years, the perpetrator has been identified as Tariq Satauf al-Hamd from the Aleppo countryside. Issam said that al-Hamd was previously a member of ISIS, but after the fall of former President Bashar al-Assad, he traveled to Idlib, the former home of Hayat al-Sham, and joined the general security. Now, it goes both ways. It's interesting, right? So the argument is that he ultimately is trying to claim they want to get rid of ISIS ideology. Then they call him an extremist and Jay's going to get fired, but then don't really do it. Then he ends up shooting people. And then what they're arguing here is that a person who was from Syria, a Palestinian journalist, says that they claim he is a former member. Either way we're talking about this, guys, and this is what I wanted to make this point. Either side of this is ISIS. Even if maybe they're lying about him, maybe the point is that the Syrian government right now is working with or is ISIS and al-Qaeda. Which you already know this, but I just think it's so insane that the work in and of itself is clearly highlighting this as they're trying to make this out to be an ISIS shooting in a location run by ISIS al-Qaeda elements. Part of me thinks this might have, when I first saw the story, I'm thinking this is probably some Zionist Israeli troop that's ended up doing, because remember, we just showed you the U.S. and Syrian forces claiming they attacked an ISIS cell. And then I right away showed you, well, here's Israel working with ISIS forces and ISIS and al-Qaeda forces running Syria. So it just doesn't make sense. So continuing, he traveled to Idlib, which was the hotbed for, what Brett McGurk said, ISIS and al-Qaeda, former home of Hayat al-Sham. The attack occurred when U.S. military officers were meeting with Syrian Interior Ministry, which to me says a lot. To have U.S. forces there working with the al-Qaeda Syrian government, which we know, and while the U.S. and Syrian troops stood guard at the base, it says, according to the Wall Street Journal, a lone gunman appeared in the window, opened fire on the U.S. and Syrian soldiers. And again, think about what's going on in the world we just talked about. To me, something seems like we have, my gut is telling me that we're talking about the same entity trying to cause chaos to deflect for larger agendas. You can decide. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. The lone gunman appeared in the window, fired at both, and he was pursued by Syrian troops and killed. Again, so we're told by the al-Qaeda ISIS troops. However, according to Isam's report, the attacker blew himself up. Weird that we're not getting that outside of the reporting from anti-war. And it says, quote, the attacker tried to reach the meeting room in the headquarters of the General Security in Palmyra, where senior officials or officers were present, and in the corridor, he clashed with the American guards and the translator and then blew himself up. That's what he's writing. That's what he claimed. And so why are we not getting that reporting? Like, something about this feels very off to me. And then it goes on to say, SM also suggested that other members of the Syrian security forces were involved in the attack. So something's clearly, like, look, if you're working with terrorists, which they are, they might well be dealing with some kind of internal coup for all we know, because there's nothing sacred here. But my point is, who knows? It seems like whatever happened, Trump's just call it ISIS attack, claim it, pretend we're fighting ISIS, and now we'll get to it. We're going to retaliate. Which maybe the whole point was just to justify action of further involvement, which is what we told you, that this was never going to end. Surprise, surprise. Everyone who said that is right. And it says, SM also, they were involved, other members of the security forces were involved in the attack. Quote, security sources confirmed to me that Syrian intelligence, along with the coalition forces, arrested 6 elements from the general security at the headquarters, accused of coordinating the operation with him, and it said that they are from the group that moved with him from the desert to the general security in Idlib. So, or one other way to look at it is that half their government is infested with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they don't know what to do about that. Because that's very clear. I think it's the majority here. If you're led by Jolani, pretty clear that's probably the case. But what it seems to me is that this is something that has lost control or being utilized through other extremist actions, like Zionism, for example. He added that Syrian authorities were, quote, unable to identify his previous affiliation with the organization ISIS, and there are hundreds like him due to the large numbers who joined and which the security apparatus needed after the fall of the regime. Right. So they just absorbed everything they could. And that was all the crazy people that were working with them the entire time. All the people they brought in from the rat lines in Turkey. And, they've been doing this for a long time, guys. Go back to the 70s, Brzezinski, in the conversation of the balkanization of Afghanistan. This has been a long-term plan. President Trump and other U.S. officials have called the incident an ISIS attack and have left out the detail that the perpetrator was a member of the Syrian military. Go figure. The group they're working with, which the U.S. has allied itself with despite Hayat al-Sham's al-Qaeda past. And as of Sunday, ISIS hasn't taken credit for the shooting, which typically they have in the past. Quote, this was an ISIS attack against the U.S. and Syria in a very dangerous part of Syria. It's all dangerous at this point. That is not fully controlled by them. That's what Trump wrote. Probably has no idea what's going on. That's how he framed it. Both Trump and the U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth vowed there would be retaliation. Think about retaliation. You guys are literally roaming through there, murdering people. Rather, Israel and Syrian forces are. In the midst of an ongoing killing spree, you guys get targeted. Now we're going to retaliate against everybody. It's just such belligerence. There's been an escalation of U.S. operations in the region. So before this, they're driving more in there, and then things happen. It's the same way they do everywhere. They're invading Iraq, and they shoot back, and they go, oh, terrorists, we're going further. The Syrian government has also announced it's escalating operations against Syria. Right. During Sharaf Jolani's visit to the Oval Office, because that's what happened, obviously. We showed you. He showed up, and they met, and it was all great, and he's going to help everybody. It's just insulting. It's like when there's so many examples. His government officially joined the U.S.-led anti-ISIS coalition, despite its al-Qaeda links and many of its soldiers having similar ideology to ISIS, putting U.S. troops operating in Syria at risk of insider attacks, which might very well be exactly what happened because they're not in control of anything. Trump pledges retaliation after 3 Americans are killed in Syria attack that the U.S. blames on ISIS. Yeah, that's what I just read pretty much in the other one. Massey says, I'm heartbroken that we lost soldiers in Syria, but now is the time to ask, why are we in Syria? I offered an amendment last week to defund foreign military groups in Syria. See, if they cared, they wouldn't be using it to act like now we need to go further in, more money and more military, more U.S. soldiers. That's not America first, guys. He put forward an amendment to stop funding them, the terrorists in Syria that the U.S. government funds. He says we should withdraw U.S. forces as well. Yeah, like we pretended to, right? This coming week, I'll sponsor legislation to repeal the 2001 authorization of use for military force. I doubt it'll happen. And then Decent News shows you right here how it started, how it's going. There's Trump. I mean, it should embarrass you all. It embarrasses me. Now, let's make sure you see the overlap, which you guys know that watch this show. This is new. This is from Haaretz, the leading Israeli newspaper, June 2025. How Israel trained and armed ISIS-linked Gazan militias. Quote, what's wrong with that, says Netanyahu in the Knesset. Right. And this is not a small thing, guys. Read the article. It's wild. And these are the groups that they're working with right now. This is the group they used to run the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food lines where they executed and raped people. Well, all very highly covered, and it's very clearly documented. In the Knesset, they discussed that they're ISIS groups, and that he said, what's wrong with that? Because they've been working with them their entire lives. They've been treating them in Syria. This is all public information if you actually care to look. We've talked about what happened the moment they took over Syria. These are real pictures. You can look at reverse image search and find that there were literal ISIS patch-wearing terrorists roaming alongside Israeli forces, overtaking Syria, executing people on the ground. Yeah, but see, this is what real journalism looks like, right? Over there, they were screaming about how they were freeing Syria. Or in Gaza. This is from October. Israel continues bombing Gaza during ceasefire, and Netanyahu aims to swap ISIS-linked gangs for Hamas, which is already happening. Now, Thomas also adds this week, and this is before, this is on the 10th, but I want to reiterate this because this is what he put forward, and, maybe it doesn't matter. He put this forward, whether he meant to do it, meant it to happen or not, which something tells me he did, and it didn't happen. This week, we vote on the National Defense Authorization Act, which in the past, that's where you get the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, the indefinite detention of American citizens, all the stuff that they pretend is just internet interest, which is almost always not. And it says, I offered these amendments to restore freedom, promote peace, and cut billions of dollars in foreign aid. Actually America first. Speaker Johnson, of course, and the Rules Committee chose to prevent any amendments from coming to a vote. Let's take a look at what those would have been. Prohibit the use of funds to query foreign intelligence information collected under 702 of the FISA Act. The things they all scream they want to stop until they're using them, then they don't care anymore. Repealing the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. They don't care about that. Stopping the transfer of MK-84 2,000-pound bombs to Israel. Nah, keep going. They want those. Strikes extension of the Ukraine security. No, keep funding Ukraine. Keep working with the strikes. Same stuff, guys. Foreign, Iraq, Lebanon, funding, Taiwan, missile. It's everything that this was supposed to be. No more wars. No more outside funding. America first. They're doing it all. And it all happened. On top of that, regretfully, Representative Keith Self says, my amendment to include language banning central bank digital currencies in the National Defense Authorization Act was not advanced and will not come to the House for a vote, just like it was stopped from Massey. So Johnson, like he stopped all those in the Rules Committee, they also stopped him from putting forward something that said we won't allow CBDCs. Is that what the America First, totally not totally not technocratic administration? Ruined that. Clearly, if they're stopping these from happening, it seems to reason that they might be doing that. Or at the very least, don't want to be hindered by being told they can't. As Catherine Austin Fitz writes, Trump and Johnson leading the implementation of the control grid with a $2 trillion a year deficit. The uniparty does what the central bankers tell them to do. See, some people can be honest about this. It is very clear what's going on. Now, we're about to 3 hours, so I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do my best to get to this tomorrow. I really want to talk about this, but it's worth giving this the time it deserves. But I'll briefly show you what I was going to get into, and we'll revisit this. Make sure, what did I put in the title? Make sure, yeah, I think we're good on that. So other than the geoengineering point, which I'll just simply point out right now and we'll get into. But as Jason Bassler writes, in just 1 week, Trump has signed a $1 trillion defense budget, pushed 6G 3D surveillance, hijacked a Venezuelan oil tanker, exempted AI firms from state law, sent $650 million to Israel and $800 million to Ukraine. It ended on day one, gave BlackRock Ukraine rebuild contracts because BlackRock's the worst thing and we're all fighting it with Biden, but now he's a good guy, right? Biometrics plus 5-year social media check at the border and DNA, by the way. Tell me again, now this is America first. We'll talk about this in depth, but Seven Seas and I talked about this in our interview, the alarming reality of your 6G future and the reimagining of society. Now, to make a point really quickly, there's a fair point to make that every time, the TV comes out. Oh, it's going to kill us all. Which there's clearly television wasn't there was a very negative effect on society, but it wasn't like the end all be all they claimed, or radio. Any new development tends to be seen as something that's going to change us all, right? There's a very big difference with this transition, because somebody was arguing, well, 5G, and then look, we're all okay. Well, we aren't really. There's a lot of things we're not acknowledging, cancers, but the 6G is a whole other conversation. Now, obviously, we could be wrong. Maybe 6G comes and goes and nothing really changes. I doubt that, because the reality of what the technology shows, you can look at what they're saying about it, what this will allow. I'll just read directly from what he wrote. 6G is the biodigital convergence. And whether you think 6G is that or it will allow it, this is what they're telling you is coming. The biodigital convergence. They're telling you that's the Great Reset. That's the Fourth Industrial Revolution. That's Klaus Schwab. That's the Great Reset. World Economic Forum. Guys, it's all the same conversation. What Trump is doing is sprinting in that direction with different narratives. So the point is the 6G, and they allow the power and the what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the right word. There's another word I was going to use. What it allows is the ability to meet certain technological ends that they weren't able to do with 5G. And there's discussions and studies and talks on this. So he says nanoscale, piezoelectric sensors programmed to hide on T cells. Neuromodulation, mRNA immunosuppression, biofield hijacking, metabolic energy harvesting, real-time integration with smart cities, data recorded on blockchain, interoperating with CBDCs masquerading as DeFi, carbon tax agenda, total information awareness, digital twins, all run by MIC's military-industrial complex, or maybe not. What does he mean by that? What do you think he means by that? I thought it was military-industrial complex when I read it first. Tell me if you think it means something else. Funded by the banks and whitewashed through academia and the media. 6G is beyond the internet of everything. The worldwide economy, all infrastructure, all environment, all life, and every facet of human condition, digitized, surveilled, and tracked. Now, let me be clear, guys. That's what they're saying. But it's for the benefit of everybody, right? Now, maybe they'll fail. Maybe we'll stop them. Maybe that doesn't mean this wasn't the plan. You can see it. They're telling you. So I just want you to really think about what this brings to the table. Now, remember the clip that what he says right here. He kind of jokes about something we've all been telling you for years, and we were called crazy. And it is very real. You can prove it from the origin of what this technology was. It was a weapon for the military. Here's what he said. All right, I think this is the one.
So we're into 6G now. I just 5G. I was a leader on 5G, getting that done. And now they're up to 6.
Let's do it again.
What does that do? Give you a little bit deeper view into somebody's skin? See how perfect it is?
Wow. Yeah, deeper, you understand. Because that's true, guys. It's not a joke. So like I said on the previous show, I'll give him credit. That's well played. People will dismiss that because he's joking, whether it's because they think it's not true or because he clearly doesn't think it's a big deal, so maybe I shouldn't. That's wild. That's like joking about, you guess geoengineering. The point is that these things they still pretend aren't real, and we know they're going on. That is not a joke, guys. Invasive surveillance using your own Wi-Fi. This is not a joke. And he just literally told you like it's no big deal. A little bit deeper. It's where it's going. And here he is posting back in 2019. I want 5G, even 6G, technology in the United States as soon as possible. Well, when this was a different administration, the Republicans were all about stopping this, and now apparently not. At least not the team sport. On top of that, he sells out to big AI, as he wrote. Trump just signed an executive order federally protecting AI companies from state law violations. President Trump signed an executive order directing the federal government to sue states that enact AI regulations. We told you this was going to happen. Lutnick promised. Doesn't matter that we told you it was not going to happen because we all pushed back when it was written down. Then they just do it anyway. Not only is this unconstitutional, it's completely lunacy. You're talking about creating a circumstance where there's no regulation on one of the most dangerous developments we've ever seen. Why? To make sure we're not harmful to global AI dominance? Yes, that's the point, guys. Gain for them at all costs, no matter what it hurts in this country. Lutnick, we're going to go create a great economy based on the AI infrastructure. Yeah, they're telling you we're sprinting in that direction alone at the expense of everything, including your own cities. As I said, guys, this is the Great Reset. I'm telling you guys, and this is that's the article there is this one. Trump and the Zionist globalist technocrats are building your new society, whether you like it or not. And this is about the network state conversation. Either prominent or what? How did he pronounce that before? I think 7C said it differently. Pronomos? I think it said pronomos. I think it's pronomos, but I could be wrong. Pronomos capital and the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state. All very, very clear. What they're telling you is openly happening. I did this show as well. The network state coup and the engineered transition to tech Zionism, which is what many of them call this. One of the leaders of the movement called it tech Zionism, and this has been something that's been repeated many times. Kills me. And then Arnaud Bertrand points out, insanely, submitting your past 5 years social media to enter the United States, which is what they're now demanding, as a tourist is only a small part of the proposed upcoming requirements. You'll also need to give your DNA. When did this happen? Guys, they just shoved this over the cliff. In addition to info you'll need to give out as a tourist eligible for the ESTA, meaning those tourists who don't need a visa, all social media for 5 years, all your biometrics, fingerprint, DNA, and iris scans, all of your phone numbers from the last 5 years, all email addresses from the past 10 years, IP addresses and metadata from your submitted photos, names of your family member. I mean, good God. And he shows it right there. Why? Can you imagine if Biden did this and during the Great Reset? None of them will call this out. Now, he also points out Palantir getting a quietly landing an education department foreign funding portal. They're currently funding genocide and rather using their AI to commit genocide alongside Israel with their Hapsar program, their Lavender program. They also apparently were working alongside them with the Grim Beeper operation. I didn't know that. Apparently they were part of this when they conducted the pager attack. So overlap that with the original point. Now Palantir, who's currently surveilling all of Americans, was involved with carrying that out in Lebanon. I mean, this just gets worse and worse, guys. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. The point is we need to understand what's happening to actually be able to do something about it. In Germany, the parliament approved use of Palantir police software. It's exploding around the world, guys. And this got some recent reach. I forget the guy's name, but somebody said they shared it, a prominent researcher. So welcome to the Palantir World Order. Derek's excellent article is getting some reach out there. I'm glad to see. It's way ahead of the curve, and it was very much breaking this down. This is crazy to me. Big Brother watch. So this is what's coming to your country. This is what's happening in the UK right now. And of course, this is not what's being called out by the Elon team sport players, whereas they're over there making it only about what Israel wants you to see. The same thing's happening in this country. We're almost getting to this. People are covering their faces to avoid live facial recognition. Think about how crazy that is off of the COVID agenda, where everybody was being told they had to mask. It says UK police grabs you off the street for not complying and demanding your details simply because you're covering your face. Why is it their legal right to demand that they always surveil you? That's not what, at least in the United States, that's not constitutional. It's like the license plate thing. If I decide I want to put something over that, something that you can still see it, but something that blocks from the cameras to be able to see it, why is that a crime? You don't have any right to constantly surveil my information. It's public. You can see it. It's right there. But they'll arrest you for that.
There's a facial recognition van. You've covered your whole face up like that.
This man didn't want to be caught by the police cameras, so he covered his face. Police stopped him. They photographed him anyway.
There's no law. There's no law against covering your face. Yeah, okay, well there you go. You let him go then.
Well, maybe it's your face? Maybe it's because I don't consent to being on there. Oh, right. Okay, why's that? Because I think it's a bit of a government overreach. Oh, right, okay.
Wow.
Can we take your details down? Is that all right?
I don't cover my face, I cover my face. Don't push me over when I'm walking down the street.
The police said this was disorderly behaviour, so they gave him a fine.
I've got now a £90 fine. There you go, look at that.
You let them know that he's got a right to cover his face and he can walk away.
Guys, it's just so ridiculous. How did we possibly get here when most people don't want this? Let's not forget, by the way, what Alex Jones wants you to think about Palantir. Still to this day, apparently.
Is interesting. I'm more concerned about this suite of companies, though, like Palantir, which is they're feeding all of the data over to Palantir so they can manipulate it with algorithms. And they're everywhere. They're looking at the wastewater during the COVID pandemic.
But you're back to this. I've looked at the scale of Palantir
and it's tiny compared to DeepSeek and all these others. And
when he first said this, you could have argued maybe to a degree of certain aspects, maybe. Certainly not the fact that, maybe not as like the involvement. I argued then that was not true. Now, that's just flat out not true. Palantir is exploding around the world. It is just simply, and regardless, to try to downplay this like some kind of small partisan thing, even as everyone from every angle of his audience is telling him to talk about it, this is about one thing.
Scale of Palantir, and it's tiny compared to DeepSeek and all these others and ChatGPT. And I'm not like defending Peter Thiel. I'm just saying it's like I get it from the liberals and the
Republicans.
Israel obsessed, whatever you want to call it. So just Palantir.
They have an enemy.
Yeah, well, maybe it's because it's important, Alex, and maybe it's because you obviously know why. And now you're over here advocating for the digital police state. Let's turn it into El Salvador. If regime change Venezuela, and you hypocrite.
Enemies list. They have an enemies list of 2 to 3 million people that they've identified as potential violent extremists. And this is being run by Alex Karp. Alex Karp said his biggest fear is that Christian nationalists will take over the government and throw him out of a window, defenestrate him because he's Jewish. He's running Palantir. Palantir has an enemies list of 3 million people.
So Alex Karp doesn't like you?
I don't think so. I don't know him, but probably not.
But you don't want to throw him out of a window?
I don't want to throw.
Yeah, that was him completely derailing the conversation and making a joke. Coward. You can't even address, if it's not a big deal, then talk about it. Break it down, because clearly he's making valid points, and then you make a joke about killing him out of a window.
Him out of a window. But I don't think he should control Palantir. I don't think he should control military procurement. That's my concern. And Peter Thiel, I mean, he's a suspicious character also. He says he's a Christian, but he's a gay man. He says he's a Christian, but he's really involved with this Rene Girard, who's sort of an interesting philosopher who's involved with a lot of the Straussians out there at the Hoover Institute. So these are two guys I don't.
Yeah, Karp's got a degree basically in classical Western civilization.
But what is Western to these people? According to Harry Jaffa, Western means protecting Israel.
Totally not defending him at all. Right? God, it just kills me. Now, speaking of, let's talk about the people who are currently in the administration that are actively working for Zionism and apparently anybody but Americans. Stephen Miller, financial stake. Remember this advisor that somehow has more power than Rubio and almost everybody in this administration? Stephen Miller's financial stake in ICE, contractor Palantir. Yeah, that's not supposed to be how that works, guys. But you know why it does in this administration? Because like I told you, nobody went through the process. Not really. The Trump administration's missing ethics pledges. And even the expert at the time told you this means they could be working along for a foreign government and we wouldn't even know. Yep. Funny how real that is now. On top of the fact that we just showed you this one, this is from November, identity verification processes broke down during Trump government transition. Routine background checks and credentialing steps were delayed or bypassed. Gee, I wonder why. As you got conflicts of interest nearly everywhere, people who are working for foreign powers. Yeah, it's not like we've completely been bought out or taken over. The reality, guys, is this is obscene. Like, it's obvious there's a profit motive on top of everything else they're doing to overtake this country. Now, Jonathan Cook says Edward Snowden blew the whistle on illegal mass surveillance by U.S. authorities of their own population and had to flee into permanent exile. Julian Assange published details of the U.S. military's war crimes and spent years locked up in high-security jail, denied his most basic rights. Francesca Albanese has documented U.S. government and corporate complicity in Israel's genocide in Gaza, and now, thanks to U.S. sanctions, cannot even have a bank account. Welcome to the future, guys. And if you can't see by now the one thing that's making that happen, it's certainly not it's certainly not the U.S. alone. She's calling out the Israel genocide, and U.S. government steps up and stops her from getting a bank account and sanctions her. Yes, we need to stop pretending we don't see what this is, and this is the whole conversation. As she explains here, anyone who deals with her faces up to 20 years in jail, U.S. jail. Notice a pattern. The U.S. is the ultimate rogue state, destroying anyone who tries to hold it to account. It is utterly lawless. Its methods are those of the gangster, ruling a world where there are no police who can bring it to heel. Trump is different only in that he no longer bothers to hide that fact. 100% agree. I'll get into this later. I was going to make that joke again. But this is just crazy to me. Here's Alex Jones. Geopolitics and Empire. Alex Jones and his friend Patrick Byrne are promoting the regime change of Venezuela in order to remake it into a technocratic digital state. You can't make this up. What should happen afterwards, Byrne says. And I was quite well known in the field of blockchain and crypto. Jones says we could turn it into the new El Salvador of Bukele. Seriously. Byrne says we could leapfrog so much. Venezuela could be turned into a Singapore in over 10 years. Most modern blockchain, digital governance, biometric ID accounts. Not a joke. P.S. Graham Allison wrote in Foreign Policy that Singapore is a technocratic and autocratic benevolent dictatorship the U.S. should emulate. I simply said, Alex Jones, the rebel fighting the deep state, now endorsing the control grid, digital technocratic future. And that's what I was saying earlier. Says, Alex has been claiming World War III is back on all this week. If memory serves me right, the day when Trump took office, AJ claimed World War III had been stopped. It's just always going, guys. Include these. Now, this is what I'm going to go through in earnest. Politico, the strange and totally real plan to blot out the sun and reverse global warming, which just so happens to be a company called Stardust Solutions that is an Israeli-run, Israeli intelligence-tied company. Every one of them it doesn't stop. It continues to be the case. The CEO, the chief product officer, the lead scientist, literally people that work for the Israeli nuclear program. The funding mechanisms, every single part of it. Now, what we're going to get into is how alarmingly this is connected to the same conversation, the same people even, when you can get into the overlaps of people like Peter Thiel, or this one specifically, Future Ventures, founded by Steve Jervston, early Thiel collaborator, in indirect via Thiel's Trump support network, or the different overlaps to people that are funding them through. We'll go through this in depth. But the point really is this is the overlapping kind of all-encompassing great reset, if you will. I don't believe for a second this is about stopping climate. I don't think that's what they even believe. I think I think we can clearly prove the lie about the discussion of what that really is. Not that we're not hurting the planet. Largely the military and these corporations, but that's not what they're trying to stop. And the way they're doing it is not even how it would happen. They just need to stop doing what they're doing. But the reality here, guys, is what they're arguing they need to do. And that's why I framed the way I did the title, because what this comes down to is something that they're already testing. We're talking about an independent company that's not bound by anything, really. They're probably already doing this in places like we talked about. They're already angling towards getting contracts with the U.S. government through Trump's administration, despite it being about stopping climate change. Work that one out for me. And the reality being that they're talking about doing this because we have to, we're going to die. Exactly like I've been telling you. And then what happens? Well, we might destroy the environment, but we have to do it because we're going to die. That's not what they're saying, but that's essentially the argument, that it could have very serious consequences, but the only way we're going to find out is if we try. And we have to, because we're all going to die if we don't. I don't believe that's the case, and I think you can prove it's not the case. The worst part for me is that, and I've talked about this years ago, in this article, in the studies themselves, it makes it clear. One of the largest side effects is the fact that if you start doing this, you can't stop, because if you stop, temperatures would skyrocket. In fact, creating the very thing they claim they're trying to stop. And that turns out to be geoengineering hostaging, or rather, being a hostage of geoengineering, sort of geoengineering, what's the word I was looking for? You know, you're being held hostage. And I think that's actually partly the model. Because now we're driving into a place where they're going to have choke points, whether water or, resources. In this case, the control over, they could decide to pull this in certain locations, or, this is, and I don't even think that's the real goal. I think that's just a possible side effect they would exploit. It's about what this might actually be about. And I don't think it's about what they claim. And in case you didn't see this, here's what they're actually claiming. We've talked about this many times. Oh my God, look at how high that spike is. It's unprecedented, except it's actually really not. If you actually look at the real long-term frame and understand that we've been past that line more than once. In fact, once way before that, much higher. So, in fact, not unprecedented. In fact, not even close. We're being lied to, guys, about damn near everything. And that's always the case. Here's one even from NBC. And it just really shows you that we're being lied to about the whole damn thing. Now, I'm not going to say there's not a problem. I don't believe it's because of what they're claiming, but what they're using to claim that is always distorted. It's always to make it seem like it's worse. I mean, we had the population bomb push before that, which clearly was not the case. They've lied to us one way or another our entire lives. And I'm going to go through this in depth, like I said, talking about, I just thought it was interesting. Bill Gates chopping down trees to save the planet, even though they're talking about how we need more trees to save the planet. Like, there's just so many weird things going on in all this. But I'll leave you with some interviews that I had with Dane Wigington about geoengineering, and we will revisit this, and I'm going to go through that. And it'll so much more in that article. It's going to blow your mind. But overall, it's important, guys, that we just try to see the big picture here. Okay, because it's just so obvious. And it's not because I do this every day. I think it's easier for people like us to see it because we're immersed in it. But these are self-evident realities. What they're doing is dishonest on its face. What they're doing is illegal on its face. They're committing genocide in front of you. They're open. All of these things are right in front of you, and the whole world can see it. It's just time that we acknowledge that and stop letting them get away with these kind of things. Or, events take place like with Bondi Beach, right? Instead of jumping to conclusions, or instead of wait for evidence, find proof, if we can ever do that anymore. Instead, we jump right to the narrative without even knowing what's going on yet. Happens every time. So we just need to show discernment and stop letting ourselves be taken by the team sport players. Now, I know you guys are here for a reason. So thank you for continuing to fight for the right things, for the right reasons, rather. That's principles, honor. Funny how that used to matter. I'll leave it there for the day, guys. Thank you for your support. As we said in the beginning, we need your support more than usual. So if you find it in your hearts to support this platform, show us what it means to you. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.